Airport information, Mike. Wind at 320 degrees at 6, temperature 5.
Strip's where I'm gonna land. Only the word is crash.
Hey, and welcome to the Wager Zone. Our first week of sports action on the season is in the books. A lot of soccer went down over the weekend. A lot of soccer is about to go back down this weekend. And now only a couple weeks away from the start of college football.
Yep.
And then a couple more weeks away from NFL football and about 2 months away from NBA training camp. So everything's starting to get started. About 2 months away from baseball playoffs, too. That's when we can start to get a little bit more excited about that. But first off, let's get into the soccer as it kicked off. Let's start out in the Premier League. Interesting opening week. Started out Friday, Man City, Burnley. I don't think the score shocked anybody, but we saw Kevin De Bruyne, who we thought might not even play, go out, and they're saying it's probably a 4 to 5 month hamstring injury with maybe surgery on said hamstring. What do you make of Man City now?
Well, he's already missed some time to this same hamstring injury, and I guess I don't know if they just misdiagnosed it or were hoping that it would just heal naturally, but it seemed like he just re-injured it really quick. It was like the 20th minute or something. He came out pretty early. So I think it's a big blow. I think he's kind of usually the guy that's in the driver's seat on this offense. He kind of directs and delivers. So they were fine without him in this one. I'll be interested to see how they do up against a little bit of tougher competition.
Well, I think that's my question, because now would be the time to grab value. Now, that being said,
I mean, their lineup is still pretty loaded.
Timber just went out with an ACL injury for Arsenal, so that defense that we thought would short up now is like one injury away from sort of towards the back end of last season when they were letting up goals. But you factor De Bruyne going out, Gundogan gone, maybe that death's a little compromised now, and I think if you said anybody on Man City that they probably couldn't lose, I think it would probably be De Bruyne. I think like even they could drop Haaland and they'd probably be all right. They put Julian Alvarez in there. He'd get 35 goals and they'd do what they'd been doing and win. So I'm a little bit interested. Would you go hard after maybe any of these other teams to sort of jump and top Man City in the Premier League with a 5-month injury like this? The problem is, as we'll get to, I don't think any of these other teams that we thought would be up there would impress us other than maybe Newcastle.
I don't know if City's gonna really try to do anything major. I think they're gonna trust that they've still got enough talent on this roster to kind of make through and get through. So we'll see. But I agree with you. Why he's not the main getter on offense, but he sets everything up, and he's
special passer.
I mean, so they're gonna miss him, but we'll see if they can navigate it through early. I don't see them making any moves.
Paqueta from West Ham, who they were going after already before the De Bruyne injury, probably goes even more, and they probably have to chuck in another $10 million. But I don't think I'd put anything right now. I didn't see anything where I thought any of these other teams totally impressed me, and we'll get to that because we'll shift to Arsenal and Forest. You had them pretty heavy in your picks, winning big, and I think we both were sitting pretty, and then that I probably around the 70th minute, Forrest got that cheap goal, and then all of a sudden we're hanging on for dear life on if we're going to get a tie or not here. So what do you make of Arsenal's open weekend? I mentioned the Timber injury. He left early in that first half. It's an ACL. Arsenal back to that defensive front line that was good for the first 6 months of the season, but that depth that they brought in with Timber, now if one of those other guys gets hurt, you start plugging in guys who start giving up goals. So what did you make of Arsenal here opening week?
First half they really impressed. They came out 2-0 first half. Thought they looked good, but when Forest got aggressive there, they got that one through. Arsenal was kind of hanging on, and it seemed like their mentality changed a little bit. I think they're going to have to try to keep on the attack because, like you said, their defense is lacking, and it's going to be trouble. This is a team that could probably needs to make some moves to start filling some gaps.
Yeah, I think that's where that Timber injury hurts them because that was going to solidify that back line. And then if one of them got hurt, then they go back to the back line that started the season, and it just starts to fall. I didn't think Kai Havertz, once again, did Kai Havertz things. Opportunities are created. Goals never seem to be finished with him.
Yeah.
If you were cutting a highlight reel, you'd look and be like, "Oh, that guy's pretty good," and then you look at stats, and it's like he has nothing every game. It's the same thing that was with Chelsea.
They created quite a bit of shots in that game. I think even in the second half, when Forrest was kind of climbing back in there, they were still creating some shots, but they weren't finishing very well.
Only opening week, so we'll see if they can sort of deal with it. Probably nothing really on Forest. I don't think either of us figured they'd go on the road and win. They're going to stay up if they can win home games, much like they did last year. Let's go to Brighton-Luton, because I was talking to you about Brighton because you liked Brighton this week.
That was one of my good winners.
And I was I want to wait and see because they've sold so much. They held Caicedo out. We'll get to the Caicedo nightmare, but he does end up going to Chelsea. I wanted to wait and see what they sort of look like. Now, granted, Luton is going to be fodder, I think, but Brighton looks pretty much the exact same as they looked last year.
Yeah.
Make a lot of money off guys, bring in new guys, and they seem to be just a well-run machine. So what do you make of Brighton? Can they once again sort of, I don't know if top 4 is reasonable, but I think
top 10.
I think top 10, and I think they could be dangerous and maybe climb into that top 6. Maybe they can get into the Europa League this year instead of the Conference League.
Yeah, they're good at creating goal opportunities and playing aggressive. They don't sit back and wait. So, take this week with a grain of salt. It was against Luton, who just moved up, and I don't see them performing well in many games this year. So probably made them look a little bit better. But I liked Brighton last year. They really impressed, and they seem to be keeping that momentum going this year.
I feel like that's going to be one where I see the line for that game when I'm going back and checking history, and I'm going, why didn't I put like $10,000 on Brighton this weekend? What was I thinking? But nonetheless, Brighton looked as good as they always have for the last couple of years. This one was interesting. Newcastle Villa, I know we were both excited to sort of see this. Pretty even game for 50 minutes, and it looked like Villa just dropped dead because Newcastle just started running through them and punching in goals.
I think we got to 1-1 in the first 15 minutes.
Yeah, your under was dead pretty quick there as goals were flying in. I was pretty heavy on this Newcastle team, futures-wise. What do you make of this Newcastle performance? Can we lump them in there with maybe where they could challenge City? Because I thought they looked probably the best of all these top-tier teams to start off the year.
I mean, I know it's only week 1, but if they continue performing like that, I mean, count me wrong from our preview show because this Newcastle team proved that they can compete with the top dogs. Not only finish top 4 like they did last season, but make a push for number 1, which, looking forward this next week, we're going to have a good one.
Yeah, I think so. I'm curious to see. I'm interested if Villa, like I said, they were playing with Newcastle for the first 50 minutes. The Tyrone Mings injury is tough. Once again, they had bought some guys to build depth on that back line. First game out, they lose a center back, so then that depth already gets tested, and now you're in trouble if one of those other guys, on the center line goes down.
Villa's they've got to be able to,
well, that's what
move forward.
I was going to.
I don't think this is.
Do you knock Villa down, or do you think they'll still be in this top 8, top 6 sort of mix?
I still think they can be in this top 8, top 6. I mean, they just went up against who we think could contend for the best in the league. So, and they, like you said, they hung with them for a little bit, but once things got out of control, they just kind of lost it. I think the score makes this look uglier than what it was.
I think that sort of 5-1 didn't quite do it justice. Now, that last 20 minutes they were running free, but I don't know how much that was Village just sort of packing it in, going, we're in a bad place right now. But
yeah, this is where the coach has got to get the players just to kind of move on from this week and move forward and start fresh in week 2.
All right, so let's move to our fun one. Brighton, Tottenham. Kane got sold right 2 days before, but
we kind of saw that coming.
Yeah, we sort of saw that coming, but you never know with Tottenham. We might think he's sold, and the next thing we know, he's signing a new 5-year deal. We'll get to PSG and their crazy man striker here in a bit. I will say it was more fun to watch Tottenham than it's probably been since I basically introduced you to them 3 or 4 years ago. I brought you in probably right on the cusp of the Pochettino era, who's now at Chelsea, when they were fun, high-flying, scoring goals, and then you got a lot of Mourinho and Conte, which was basically
win 1-0 on a penalty.
Yeah, sit back and see if you can grab one goal. The problem is Tottenham can't sit back. Their defense still wasn't good.
Atrocious.
I think I told you if Ivan Toney had been there, I think he would have gotten a couple more than we saw.
They're very lucky that Brentford only got the 2 goals. But I tell you what, I was really impressed with Maddison's play. I don't feel like this Tottenham team was missing Kane at all. It was all on the defensive side that they looked horrible, but their offense, like you said, they were moving crisp. Players were kind of everywhere. I did notice, and I kept texting you during the game, Son didn't really make much of an impact in this game, and he ended up coming out early, early-ish, I said, the 60th minute, something like that.
Well, I had read that this coach, the Aussie guy he tends to work guys real hard at this rate and then pull them. He always uses all 5 as a sub. So I think if you're gambling on scores, that might be something to look at where he uses that front line up of Kolashevsky's son, Richarlison, and then maybe 60th, 70th minute he starts to pull those guys to get fresh legs up there. So maybe there's a lot of interchanging up there. So I think the value is still good at the 2-to-1s on those guys, but if they start dropping below that, that value might not be there because you aren't probably going to get 80, 90 minutes out of these guys. You might be getting 60 to 75 minutes out of these guys. I thought Brentford looked pretty good. Definitely, you see the miss of Ivan Toney, but I thought they played Brentford football. They look how they usually look, capable of beating top-tier teams. Probably not going to be in that top 6, but certainly probably a top 10 Premier League team this year. Do you think Tottenham can make a play into that top 4 with this? I think they're still missing a midfielder. Now, Betancourt will come back, who got hurt towards the end of the year, to take up for that skip. You don't know how he's going to return, but you talked about how good Maddison played. I thought the front line was at least moving around, although they didn't finish. But they seem to be missing a midfielder, and I'm worried what's going to happen. Like if they play a Liverpool or a Chelsea, those goals are going to start pouring in. Or even we just talked about Brighton. Like what would Brighton score on this Tottenham team?
Well, the problem is I'm pretty sure Tottenham had 85% possession in that game against Brentford. But the problem was every time Brentford got a chance, it was a goal-scoring opportunity almost every time they got the ball. So I don't think the more talented teams are going to miss on those opportunities.
The other thing I thought, the goalkeeper was better for Tottenham than last year, but I thought he was a little wild and crazy too. Now that was his first Premier League start. He could have been a little more juiced up, but I'm not 100% sold they solved the goalkeeping issues as well. So
I find it hard to you go through the top 4 to 6 teams. Is Tottenham going to be able to beat them in something? I mean, Tottenham's going to have to get 3 to 4 goals
Yeah.
to beat any of those top 5 or 6 teams. Otherwise, it's going to be massive.
Yeah.
A lot of overs.
Yeah.
I think
at least until they start getting juiced. We did decent on them last week. We got the 2.5 and the 3.5, but I'm curious if that 2.5 starts going in like the 170 type range, and then it becomes a little harder to grab it. Let's move to the big game on that Sunday, Liverpool-Chelsea. It sort of looked as the same teams as last year. Liverpool can get just hammered on that counter with fast guys behind. If Jackson finishes on a couple, if Chilwell isn't, a hair off sides, Chelsea's scoring 2 goals. You flip that around.
Salah had a goal taken away.
I mean, literally, the hairs on his head off sides, and they go up 2-0, and then maybe they run away with it. Were you impressed with Liverpool or Chelsea here? It looked as similar to what last year was for both these teams to me.
I was a little bit more impressed with Chelsea than Liverpool. Liverpool looked very much the same that they were last season, but I thought Chelsea was a little bit more aggressive, I thought. They only got the 1 goal, but I thought it was a good outing for them, and I think they'll be happy with the draw against Liverpool.
Yeah. The big thing hanging out over this was Moise Caicedo really had offers from both teams to be bought from Brighton. Chelsea ended up going to like 150 million American dollars to get there. And I will say that once again, I think this is probably a theme through a handful of these teams. It seems like everyone's missing a midfielder. It seemed Chelsea got their midfielder here. Does that bump them into like real top 4 contention here, or were you still a little worried about who's scoring goals? I will say I thought Sterling was awful. They got to put Mudryk in there. Sterling was great for a period of time, but he just didn't do anything. And as soon as they put Mudryk in there, they started having that fast wings with him and Jackson and flying up the sides. And I think this Caicedo thing makes me think Chelsea could be a little bit more of a player than what I saw from Liverpool here in the top 4, but I still don't know who's scoring goals.
Yeah, I think you have to look at it. Which team's more satisfied with the draw in this one? It's definitely Chelsea, and I think we both caught Liverpool's probably right there, top 4 on the edge. Being able to hang with them, I don't know if it gets them to that very top tier. They're going to have to generate more goals, but I thought it was decent. Yeah. And we'll see how they do moving forward.
Because, even if you look at Chelsea's goal, it was because a ball fired in there and then came off the defender's shin and went in.
I'm interested to see if anything comes up on Chelsea's spending, what they've done the past year or so. There's some teams that are not happy and are trying to dig up or create dirt on Chelsea to get them in trouble.
The other thing I was a little curious with Liverpool, I know depth's important, but I feel like they have too much up top. Nunez didn't get the start. Jota got the start. He got the goal. And that's sort of what Jota does. You never love him, but he always seems to come away with a goal every game I watch. And they put Diaz up there, they put Salah up there, Nunez came off the bench. You had Gakpo, which we thought dropping back into the midfield. Yeah. It just seems like they have a lot of sort of forward scoring thinkers. Salah got pulled out and was a little pissed off, but that's always going to happen. It just seems like they have a lot of guys to play sort of 3 positions up front, and
and even the guys that like Gakpo and stuff that they pulled back to midfield, they're not playing like midfielders. They're playing like the forwards up front. That's what got me
nervous. Is it's nice attacking, and they will probably thrash any of these low level teams. Mm-hmm. But you saw it with Chelsea. You just have, the new guy McAllister coming in there. He's not really a defensive midfielder. I think that's why Caicedo was so important. We'll see if they can pick one up before the transfer deadline. It just seemed a lot of people were getting there at their back line.
Yeah, it's like you said, they're going to go in against these weaker teams. They're going to destroy them. and it's going to give them a false confidence, and then they're going to go up against a Man City, and just get destroyed because
see those open lanes, and we're like, oh, okay, all right, let's move to Monday's game. I think this was this one cost me some money. We'll get to Barcelona and Tafe as a disappointment, but there were other factors there. This factor actually sort of helped us. This officiating disaster, but Man U Wolves. It's a good thing I didn't get on the show because after we talked about our futures, Wolves coach quit, and I was like, because I had them maybe climbing into the top 10, and then their coach quit, and they brought in the old Bournemouth coach who got fired for some reason we aren't quite sure. Somehow managed to keep that team up last year and lost his job, but.
Kudos to Wolves. They fought hard this whole match.
They looked good because I was sort of out on them thinking they might be in relegation and they might come back and need that point. Man U looked basically exactly like Man U did last year. It's sort of, they didn't give up goal. They found a way to get one, and that was sort of the game. And got a call where the goalkeeper basically got to just take out two guys and not have to play the ball, and a penalty was called. But
definitely got away with a bad call there. So bad that the officiating crew is out for week 2.
It's okay. They only screw Brighton and Wolves out of points, not Man U.
But Man U's lack of finishing. I saw a lot of opportunities, a lot of open drives to the goal, and just couldn't finish. And they kept failing to finish. Wolves got confident, and then all of a sudden it was, can we hang on?
Yeah.
And I think this match definitely should have been a draw.
Yeah. And speaking of midfield, I don't think they're short midfielders, but they have sort of a little bit of the same problem as Liverpool. They have a lot of midfielders who want to go forward, and it was basically just leaving Casemiro on an island trying to stop like 3 Wolves guys flying down the field. And I don't know if you can play Fernandez and Mason Mount and then have Garnacho and Anthony on the wing and Rashford up front. Now, this all might change when Højlund, who's hurt right now, who's their striker they bought, you move Rashford back out to the wing where he's more comfortable because, he looked lost up front playing striker up there. He's certainly not going to remind anybody of Erling Haaland. Maybe they get a little more balanced once Højlund gets up there, but it looked much the same as last year to me. That they got the win, which is what they did last year. A lot of ugly wins, but 3 points is 3 points. But
do you read more into good fight from Wolves or bad performance from Man U?
Man U seems to be what they are, so I think it's just one of those teams that probably better playing on the counterattack, which it might be one of those things where they struggle more with a team like Wolves, where Wolves will give you the ball and say, we'll hit you on the counter. And then when Man U plays some of these top-tier teams who are going to hold the ball, and then they can hit them on the counter, they look a little better than they do. So I'm sitting, Man U's going to be what they are. It's probably going to be a battle between 4th to 6th. I don't see them as jumping into that contender territory, whereas I think Newcastle might jump in there. Arsenal's already there, and I think see them more in the Chelsea, Liverpool, Man United. We'll see what these sort of teams that look a little off.
Well, I think there's going to be a big cluster there between the 4th position and like the 8th, where it could
depending on what Villa
where
sort
it
of
could be
looks
just
like.
a handful of points difference between moving up to the 4th spot to the 8th spot. It's going to be quite the cluster there, I think.
Definitely so. All right, let's move to Liga. If you want fun scoring games, go to Liga. Like I said, that Monaco Clermont foot game was great, but the one game that wasn't great, and I watched some of it. I could not watch all of it because it was just a brutal football game. PSG played Lorient to a 0-0 tie.
Missing some stars, I guess.
Magically, Mbappe was invited back to the team.
Yeah, all of a sudden they were ready to have him back.
And I guess extension talks are now in session. So PSG back to normal once Mbappe gets in there, or is this just going to continue to be sort of a weird season? Because in our futures, I said there might be a spot here where you can grab a couple of those other French teams and see if you can get good value. Because honestly, PSG looked like nobody wanted to play football on Saturday.
Even if they do bring Mbappe back, he's not really happy there. We'll see how he performs, but Neymar's gone, so I don't know. This could it's a little too early to hit the panic button, but if the switch doesn't flip when Mbappe comes back, then you hit the panic button.
We'll see how they score. I guess next week Mbappe will be back. See how that looks, but I'd throw a couple on a handful of those French futures just to see.
They probably haven't moved much yet.
Now, I don't think Mbappe's going to go anywhere. We'll get to La Liga here in a second, but with Militao's injury and Real's goalkeeper going out, they probably got to buy now a center back and a goalkeeper. So I think that's sort of also where Mbappe's team sort of went, well, we're screwed now because they aren't going to be able to pay for us. So let's play out this season and see what goes down here with Real Madrid. But from what I saw, it will have to be a lot of Mbappe goals to at least be in there.
Now, he can bring a lot of goals, but he doesn't also have Messi sitting over there.
Now, Dembele's coming, but Dembele misses 5 months every year. So, if the Koulibaly from Germany, and we'll get to the Bundesliga preview, ends up there, and you give me Mbappe, Dembele, and Koulibaly, now we're talking a little bit more of a frightful front line. But right now, I think I'd grab a handful of those French futures. I mean, it was just 3 years ago that Lille ended up winning the French league. So if it's one of those things where PSG doesn't really care, you're getting really, really good value there. All right, let's move to La Liga. We'll get to the futures later. La Liga season kicked off. We had to miss last week due to some illness. We did get our pick show out, though. But Friday, Valencia, Sevilla, two teams you think probably are going top four. I watched a little bit of this game because I had money on Sevilla. I thought they'd be better than they were last year. They were not. They looked... Somehow they win Europa League games, don't win La Liga games. Granted, Valencia, a solid, middling sort of top-tier team, but I think I'm going to have to drop this Sevilla thing pretty early. Just sort of a dreadful game. Defense wasn't great. Offense was hot and cold. I didn't see a lot of good life out of Sevilla here.
Yeah.
All right, Real Sociedad, Girona, speaking of going through the motions. Now, I did win my Kobu to score bet, but Real Sociedad, tough start to the year. I'm curious here. They made that push into the Champions League spots. If they can do this again. Team pretty similar. They brought in a couple more guys, but, 1-1 draw at home versus Girona. Doesn't really tick things off to me. And we'll get to my futures here. I think there can be a couple teams in there that might take their spot, especially once Champions League starts messing with Real Sociedad and playing with that depth. It's not a team that's used to playing 2-3 times a week.
Yeah, they'd be going, Wednesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Sunday, Wednesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Sunday and
trust me, Real Sociedad isn't getting the beneficial schedule that Barcelona and Real Madrid get. So not off to a great start there. 1-1 home. Real Sociedad usually pretty solid at home. Who did get off to a good start was Real Madrid. 2-0. Nice win at Athletic Bilbao. Was bad. Militao blew out his ACL a day after Courtois blew out his ACL.
Yep.
I'm curious here, how dangerous do we start to get here with Real Madrid? I mean, they have 5 midfielders who are probably 5 of the 10 best in the world. You still got Vinicius, you got Rodrigo, but Benzema gone, Militao gone, Courtois gone. Like 3 of the 4 of your spine is gone here. Do we panic quite on Real Madrid yet? Not to mention the whole coaching situation where the coach is already not coming back. He's already coaching Brazil in 2024. So do we worry Real Madrid, or do we sort of wait till this window closes and see what they bring in to
I'm interested to see what kind of moves they make to shore this thing up. They're going to be right there. I mean, they're usually far and away the front runners. I mean, it's going to take a big drop off. But there's about 3 teams behind them that could make a solid push.
Yeah, I think so. They did get the goals. Bellingham came in there, got a really good goal. I can't say enough. I thought Jude Bellingham played, great. And, like I said, that midfield probably has 10 best midfielders in world soccer right now. Now, granted, you can't play your whole team in the midfield, but, with those two and Vinicius and Rodrigo out there, I just do wonder about goals. They found 2, and maybe that's what they do. That's sort of been... They find 2 goals, shut down on the defensive end. It'll be in. They bring in Kepa from Chelsea. I don't want to, not a world beater, but solid enough. I'd say I'm curious what they do along that sort of center line. They have enough to sort of hold steady, win every game 2-0, 2-1, 1-0, sort of like what Real Madrid does. But injuries are starting to pile up there. Villarreal, Real Betis, 2 of those teams we were talking about who could climb into that top 4. Real Betis, sort of a down year last year.
Yeah.
Came out, good win on the road. It's sort of what I wanted to see from Sevilla. I saw from Real Betis and got that win 1-0 at Villarreal. So maybe Real Betis back into sort of playing their way into one of those top 4 positions.
Yep.
And then we'll get, I think this game really cost us a ton of money. I thought there'd be scoring at least, and Barcelona wouldn't fall into Getafe's tactics, which basically... I don't know quite where to blame. It probably lies a little piece here. The ref basically had 0 control from the start, as Getafe was just clotheslining people from the beginning of the game on. But then Barcelona reacted. Offense went in the tank, certainly for the first 60 minutes.
Yeah, it didn't get balanced back until they evened out the red cards there.
And even
then it's just yellow, and...
Now, granted, Barcelona could have gotten that penalty.
I thought we had a penalty at the end.
I'm still a little confused.
Handball.
Do we go?
I only saw like one replay, and then they ended the coverage. So I thought we were going to get a shot there to get the win. I had a parlay with just all I needed was a Barcelona win. I had the money line. Last leg of the parlay would have hit maybe some money in, but no, I got that atrocious disaster that game was.
So, I think this goes into a little bit of the Man U question. We saw Barcelona last year.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't a Barcelona team that, basically anybody who's watched them play for the last 25 years is used to, which last year was not. It was a lot of 1-0s, 2-0s type gross. And this looks similar. Is this going to be a continuing thing here where it's sort of like Man U? Where it's just going to be 1-0s, 2-0s, see if they could get Lewandowski on the end of a... Because that's basically what this game was. Lewandowski had like 2 chances. He had one really solid chance, missed the header. And I think that was pretty much all their opportunities. I mean, I didn't see a ton. And so is Barcelona going to be this Barcelona from... sort of last year where we need to bail on Barcelona goal overs pretty quick?
Yeah, I'm thinking bail already. Just one weekend. I don't know. I don't even know if this Barcelona could hang top 4.
Yeah, I think they'll be all right, but I'll get to it in my futures. I didn't like the way they looked.
No.
Now, they seem to have some shuffling on the midfield. The defense still looks solid, which as long as their defense is solid, but goals are becoming a more and more problem. It's like if Lewandowski doesn't score.
Yeah.
They do not score goals because no one seems capable of scoring goals for Barcelona other than Lewandowski. That said, Getafe, tough place to go. They do what they do, where they basically have a lot of big dudes who rough you up, and if you fall into it, you usually get a 0-0 type result. So it'll be interesting to see if Barcelona can open up that offense a little bit. All right, before we get into our football, I got some futures left. Serie A and Bundesliga open up this week, and we didn't get to our La Liga futures. But on that, we were talking about a couple things. I'm going on league winner here. Atletico Madrid, I'm going to put 2 units on plus 8 to 1. I thought they looked good. They seem to have their little...
They started a little slow.
I should say, they're like Getafe with good players, which when they're physical like that and they're trying to defend, they no longer seem to want to be this team that plays open. Diego Simeone never wants to play open, so they seem to have the roster back to what Atletico Madrid does. I like that 8 to 1, especially we talked about it. Neither of us like the way Barcelona looked this weekend. Real Madrid's injuries are starting to pile up. There were already sort of questions. How are they going to score goals without Karim Benzema? Doesn't look like Mbappe's coming. So I liked that 8 to 1. And what I liked even more was league winner without Madrid or Barcelona. Minus 155 for Atletico Madrid. I have a 5-unit future on that one. I really, really like that one.
Yeah.
I watched a lot of these teams. I talked about Sevilla. Didn't look like they were in the class of Atletico Madrid. Villarreal, Valencia, always and then Real Sociedad, we mentioned they're 1-1. It might be an overreaction, but I don't think anyone's in this top 3. We talked about Real Betis. They were the one from a couple years ago that were moving up until last year. So I really like that 155. I think you're getting really, really good value on that. Couple top 4 bets. Real Betis, I mentioned, plus 550. A top 4, 2 units on that one. Osasuna, I always like their offense, and maybe if a couple of these teams fall back, especially a couple of them, we mentioned Real Sociedad, playing Champions League and stuff like that, not used to it, maybe Osasuna climbs in there, 2 units on a 10 to 1 on that one. And then, just to cover my bets here, minus 350 Atletico Madrid, 5 units on that to cover those two, balance out the books. I
think lock top 4.
That's what I would find it very, very, very hard to believe Atletico Madrid drops out of the top 4. So I think that's at minus 350. You're getting actually decent. I know it's a juice, but put it this way. Real Madrid and Barcelona were in territory where you couldn't take it, and this was much lower. And I know they started last year slow, but ever since that midway point after the World Cup, they've
looked better than Real and Barcelona.
They've probably been playing the best of the 3. And it was just 3 years ago that they won the league. So I think that relegation, this one was made before the weekend's play. I had a play on Almeria to beat Rayo Vallecano. I thought Rayo would drop out. Their coach left. They sold a lot of players. It's a very, very small club that's been sort of punching above their weight to their great organization. But then they go into Almeria, win 2-0. And so this one doesn't look as great, but plus 500 on relegation, Rayo Vallecano, 2 units on that one. And then top goal scorer, I got a couple on that one. I mentioned Kobu. He's been on fire basically since about February of last year. Got another goal, 100 to 1 on that one. Now, granted, Lewandowski probably is that one. But then I was curious about Rodrigo at 23 to 1. Somebody's going to have to score goals for Real Madrid. You probably think Vinicius, but if you watch that game, Vinicius just isn't comfortable going into that inside. He wants to stay on that wing, which is going to limit his goals. He's going to get his 15 or so goals, but he's more of a havoc creator than a goal scorer. Rodrigo looks a little bit more comfortable coming from the outside and going in. You might want to grab Jude Bellingham because he seems to be the one, but I don't know if you're even capable of, from that midfield spot, of getting that many goals. So I Rodrigo 23 to 1 on that one for La Liga futures for me. All right, Serie A futures. This one's starting off
I don't have any futures prepared for these leagues,
Yes,
so
I
Shamp's
know.
having to run through these. So.
We're going to have to run through these.
I'm still working on getting deeper into my soccer knowledge here.
Where he's EPL, and then we branch from there.
Yeah.
Top goal scorer. There are a couple in here. Granted, this is a little bit more open than you'd think, but Nzola, who just went to Fiorentina, probably will play striker there. Had 13 goals last year for Capicolo, something like that. But he's a big-time striker. He's athletic. Fiorentina, always a high-scoring team.
Yeah.
I like that ability.
Get a lot of goals in Syria.
Yes. So at 41-1, decent value, half unit on that. Skamaka, who went from Syria to West Ham last year. West Ham decided they didn't like playing young, new people. So he's back in Syria at Atlanta this year. If he can secure that spot at that striker position at Atlanta always a team who can score goals, play a high tempo. 30-1, I think, is pretty good value there. Now the tricky thing is, we mentioned it with like Tottenham, where same style of sort of play here, where he might play 60 minutes, he might play one half. Coach tends to rotate his front line guys so they can keep that pace and pressure up, but they do get goals. So Skamaka there, 30-1, and then Bully Di, who plays on Saltaria. Basically, if they score goals, he's the reason they score goals. He ended up third last year with 15 goals, so I mean at 35-1, I think you're pretty good value there, especially with Syria. A lot of these teams just don't have that like killer striker other than Napoli and Victor Osimhen. Yeah. And if Osimhen gets hurt, or there's still a month left, if some stupid team offers Napoli like $250 million, which we just had a defensive midfielder go for 150, so he might not even be in the league, and then this becomes wide open. But or if he gets hurt, which he's always been one who gets a little bit banged up. These might be decent value plays here, especially for teams that traditionally score a lot of goals. And if you look at Inter, they don't technically have a striker right now unless Lukaku comes back into the fray. Juventus seems to be rotating through about 50 different people along their front lines. Same with AC Milan. So I think there's some value there on some goal scorers. Outright winner, Milan, 4-1. I like what they did in the offseason. I know they lost a couple defensive midfielders, but I really, really like Milan at 4-1. And Roma, 11-1. Not a big bet on it, but maybe Jose can work some magic here. I think this Serie A this year, probably 8 teams that are all
wide open,
really, really tight. I don't know if all 8 can win it. It's probably more like 5 or 6, but I think decent long shot, 4-1 Milan, 11-1 Roma, top 4 at Atlanta at 250, and I mentioned Fiorentina at 8-1. Really, really like that one. And then relegation, Hellas Verona plus 115, 2 units on that. They've sort of been. Each year, they get worse and worse and worse, and they barely scraped by last year. I think they're sitting right there in the relegation zone at plus 115. So 2 units on that one. All right, now we'll go to the Bundesliga. All right, to the Bundesliga and some Bundesliga futures. I got a couple I really, really like here. We'll go to top goal scorer. Couple guys I like. Timo Werner, I thought played great in that game over the weekend at plus 850. Right before he went to Chelsea, he led the Bundesliga in scoring. So 850 on that, half unit on that one. Koulibaly, who, if he stays at Frankfurt, seems to get better and better and better. He might actually be the best striker in there other than Harry Kane. So I think 850 on that one. He could get into that 20 goals. Bundesliga, only 18 goals was the goal scoring leader last year. So I think that he can get to that. 850 half unit on that. And then we're going to go with a pretty easy one. Kane, I was shocked, is only minus 200 to lead the Bundesliga in goal scoring.
Maybe they're thinking it's going to take time to gel.
But like I said, 18 goals led last year. Harry Kane gets 18.
He'll get that many penalties.
Yeah, in a bad, certainly for Bayern. Now, I'll get into my thoughts on Bayern. I'll bring you in on this because I'm curious your thoughts because you do follow. Probably the second one you follow is the Bundesliga the most here. But Harry Kane minus 200, I couldn't pass up that value because they're just. I mean, he's 30 goals for Bayern Munich, easy.
That move says they want to win Champions League.
So 4 units on Harry Kane minus 200, cover those other two guys. And, basically, these 3 are probably going to lead the league in goal scoring. So I'm winning money somewhere on that. Yeah. Here's what I wanted to bring you in on. League winner, I'm going with Leipzig at 9-1. We saw last year, Munich ended up winning the league, kind of. I mean, I don't know if there's ever a way to back end win the league, but somehow Munich did it. And then I think we both, when we saw Kane, we were like, oh, Munich, easy. Bundesliga win, contenders in the Champions League once again. And then I watched, probably dumb, but I watched a little bit of that Leipzig-Munich game over the weekend. Now, granted, Park, who they got from Napoli, probably one of the best center backs in the league, didn't play. Kane came in late, but I will say it looked very similar to a lot of Munich we watched last year. Defensive issues. Tuchel just seems like a crazy man now. I mean, it's a minor miracle. He won a Champions League, even more so that he won it over Man City in it. But I'm curious if you think there's value here in taking either a Leipzig or a Dortmund. You might even bring Bayern Leverkusen in there, but we seem to fall for that trap every year. But the last half of the season, Leverkusen was winning a lot of football games, so maybe that tails over, or maybe 4 months in, we've lost $2,000 on them. What do you make of this league?
I could definitely see Munich getting distracted by Champions League again. They definitely, I think, especially if, City maybe is a little vulnerable, they may make a strong push for Champions League and just kind of just cruise in Bundesliga, and they got to be careful in that cruising because Leipzig's right there.
Well, I think that's what they thought they would do last year, and then Dortmund came on, and if Leipzig hadn't had such a bad, sort of first half of the season, I think they would have been right there because they were playing really well towards the end of the season, including beating Bayern Munich in Munich. And you take that, you take this weekend's game. Granted, it's like taking that Arsenal City game and being like, oh, look, Arsenal's ready to contend. But it sort of shocked me that Munich looked pretty much exactly like they were last year. Opportunities created, none really finished. Defense all over the place. Tuchel afterwards saying, I have no clue what to do. And Leipzig just runs through them like crazy. I know Kane comes in there, scores them, probably 25, 30, 40 goals. But I'm curious if there are more problems here for Munich than just striker. It seemed like we were all quick to be like, oh, they got a striker, problem solved here. I'm wondering if maybe there are a couple more issues lingering in there. So I'm going to do a little bit on Leipzig because I loved the way they looked. Yeah. They seem to be improving into a contender. Top 4, Freiburg plus 450. Just like the way they play soccer. If a couple of those fall back, Union Berlin playing Champions League this year, think they might fall back a little bit. We mentioned our sort of love of Bayern Leverkusen and losing money on them as they sort of screw us over every year. Frankfurt, you never know what you're going to get. We're getting a 4-0 or a 1-0 loss. And so I think Freiburg, who's a little inconsistent, but plays that offensive style. I like them 450 top 4. I mentioned Frankfurt. Koulibaly on that team. I like some of the moves they've made. I think they can contend. 4-1 on that one. And then I'm going to do it, but I'm going to ride Leverkusen. I like the way they close the season. I like this coach in there. I think they'll play a little steady, Don't love that Diaby's gone, but I think they made some nice moves. I think they'll be contenders. 155 top 4 for them. 2 units. I mentioned Union Berlin and a couple of the others that I'm a little worried about playing Champions League and European football for the first time. I will say, watching Union Berlin playing Champions League in Berlin, those first couple games
That'll be exciting.
It's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Those players are going to be going off all over the place. But Leverkusen minus 155, 2 units. And then basically this is my biggest play on futures. Darmstadt, who just moved up from the German Bundesliga into it, is only minus 125 in the relegation. If anybody's watching the German Cup, they just lost to a regional team. Something Hamburg. Regional team means they aren't even in actual pro league.
Yeah.
They're playing a regional part of Germany with other teams, which is basically your glorified Y League team playing. And not only that, then I looked how they did last year. They didn't win it. They finished 4th. So they didn't even get to move up into the higher regional.
Yeah.
They'll be back into the same regional. So a little concerning that you lose 3-0. I have no clue. They might have started weirdos, but they couldn't have been starting any more weirdos than what they were playing or starting, which highly concerns me. So minus 125, bottom 3, Durmström, 8 units on that one. We're going to get all our money back on the futures just on that one right there. So that wraps that up. Anything, Syria, you think there's going to be any weird winner at all, or you think Milan's Juventus? What do you think Juventus will be?
Well,
technically speaking, they ended up finishing 2nd in Syria. If it wasn't for the point doctrination, can they climb back and challenge, say, a Napoli or one of the Milans here?
I don't know. We saw Napoli, they made a strong push in Champions League, kind of faded there at the end, but I don't know. We'll see if they can put this. I think Juventus pushed through hard, even with the points deduction thing. Came on a little bit there at the end of last year. If they can keep that momentum going, I think they can compete for it.
Yeah, I was interested. I might be a heavy on bets on Juventus early. I think they're going to be better than people think. Now, the coach plays our favorite style of sit around and defend until you can get one counter and score and win a 1-0. But nonetheless, I think they're going to be a little better than people think. So I'm curious to see what sort of individual game odds Juventus gets. All right, let's move to our college football preview. Because we missed a week, we're going to have to pack in a whole lot. And we're going to start out in the MAC side of things here. So let's start out with, let's just say the best talent, because I thought they underwhelmed a bit last year. Really, the first time I really was sort of disappointed in this Toledo team. They were much better than their sort of 9-5 record. They did end up making the championship game, but did not play well in that. So Toledo comes back. They bring a lot of the same guys back, but I think you were also a little disappointed them in too. Finished 9-5 last year. Win total sits at 9. What do you make of Toledo this year?
All eyes are on them to win the conference. I think they're right around 2-1, maybe even worse than that to win the conference. But as we've seen in the MAC, anything can happen on any week, any given Wednesday
Yes.
for the MAC. But yeah, they bring back a lot of guys. They got a great dual threat quarterback coming back, a lot of defenders coming back. And they're definitely the odds on favorites to win this conference.
Yeah, I'm just... I was disappointed. So I'll see if they seem to just find ways to lose games last year to teams they shouldn't. We'll see if that's better this year. Open up at Illinois. I'm curious to see where they go.
That could be a game.
And they've been able to go places and win football games. So I think we'll get a nice little feel there. Also play San Jose State, which I think will be a nice little feeler game to see where those two teams are at as well. All right, next up in our MAC preview, we're going to go to Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois, after the miracle season the year before.
Yeah, they've been down, up really big, and then down again last year. So
back down. They return a lot of the guys from their team last year, which is a lot of the guys from the team the previous year. It was a difficult schedule last year, and I think they lost a handful of games that they were right there in, and then it sort of snowballed last year. Do you see improvement from this team? Do you put this team in contender category?
Potential contender, maybe worth long shot look, but I'd say 6 wins. I'd put them probably third in the division.
Third, okay.
Maybe. But they're probably one of the better teams with the best, value plays as far as moving up. Because like I said, and we've seen the last few years with Northern Illinois, teams can make a jump, and they're one of the teams that's capable of doing it.
Yeah. This one interests me because the number sits at 6.5, right where you said.
Yeah.
Their schedule, early on, is really kind of difficult.
Yeah.
At Boston College, Southern Illinois is not a joke. I know it's a subdivision team, but it's a pretty good subdivision team.
Yeah.
It's sitting with a lot of dudes who all will know each other because they're all coming out of the same sort of football area. At Nebraska, Tulsa, at Toledo.
That Tulsa game was a great game last year.
Yeah. And that's theoretically, they could start 0-5. It's not out of the question that they start 0-5. And
then you look, you've got Eastern Michigan at, Central Michigan's probably a win, but you're on the road at Toledo.
Yeah. If you start 1-4, 0-5, does this sort of snowball from last year, and you're like, this is the same thing as last year, and you get that 3-9. Now, if they can spring, upset here, Boston College, who knows with Nebraska, get that win versus Southern Illinois. We mentioned that game last year versus Tulsa. Take that and enter into it, and split the Toledo-Akron game, and you're sitting 4-2, something like that. Then maybe they roll through the MAC. So I think how they sort of play early and how they deal with maybe some losses piling up early will sort of dictate their season.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, Eastern Michigan. Sort of our favorite kind of, they are what they are. It's always sort of 7-9 wins ever since sort of Chris Creighton has gotten this program where it is.
I'm surprised nobody, I mentioned to you earlier that nobody's scalped and picked him up for a bigger program, because he's been very steady with this Eastern Michigan program in a very volatile MAC.
Yeah, and I think this team might sit a little bit on that low end. I know they lost a handful of guys on the offensive side of the football, which has me a little nervous, but he seems to be pretty plug and play with that offense. Can that defense continue to hold up, which I think is always sort of the main thing with Eastern Michigan. What do you make of this Eastern Michigan team here?
I think they're solid. I think they're going to kind of hover right around where they've been, probably a little drop down from the really good year they had last year. I think they're another team that's kind of right in that 6-7 win window. An upset here, jump up. An upset against them here, they jump down. But I think they're going to kind of be right there in the middle of the pack.
Yeah, and I think they have a little bit of the reverse as Northern Illinois. I think their schedule is pretty favorable. I don't know if they can go to Minnesota and win that, but Minnesota appears to be in wreckage. Like handful of those Big 12, Big 10 North teams.
One thing they've got going against them is they've got a really tough conference schedule. They got to go to Northern Illinois, to Toledo, to Buffalo. Those are all very tough games.
I can probably tell you now on November 21st at Buffalo on a Tuesday night, I will be taking Buffalo no matter what that spread is. I'm guessing
Can you say 2 feet of snow?
I'm guessing that game is not going to be comfortable, even with a team that's in Eastern Michigan. It's a little bit different up there. I'm curious to see if this can be a plug-and-play offense where they can sort of rebound, find enough points, and just manufacture enough wins to get to 8, 9 to overachieve, then sort of hit that 7 mark where I think that's sort of their 6, 7 is sort of their low. 8, 9 would be a good season.
Yeah, the way I look at the MAC this year, you've got 2 or 3 teams that I think are clear and away top tier, and then you've got a big clump of 6 to 8 teams in both divisions that could either jump up or jump back, and this is one of those teams that just kind of falls in that pack.
Yeah. All right, Central Michigan, I think, speaking in that pack, it was...
Gotta love Jim McElwain's coaching.
Yes. I think this team seemed to be good at... they were probably the weirdness of the MAC last year.
Well, I think preseason they were one of the favorites to win the conference.
They were one of the favorites.
Yeah.
They started out...
I think I was big on them.
Yes. They started out very well, and then it sort of just went down. And by the end of the year, it was completely lost. I've always liked Jim McElwain. I've thought he was a pretty good offensive coach. Little disappointed in them last year. Can they bounce back here this year? I think this is one of those teams. I think it could be anywhere from about a 5 to an 8-win team.
Yeah, I think it's all going to be depending on how the transfers plug and play. He brought in a lot of transfers. They've lost some talent, but he, is the talent he's bringing in better than what they had last year? So, are they really regressing if they lose starters from last year? It's one of those windows, but. Speaking of tough schedules, they got 3 non-conference games right off the bat that are extremely tough. They got at Michigan State, at Notre Dame, and at South Alabama, and I think South Alabama is a really solid team. And then, not long after that, they got to go to Buffalo, and they host Eastern Michigan. You're looking at 5 potential losses in your first 6 games. Hard to recover from that.
Yeah, I think that South Alabama game is the key. They'll write off the Michigan State and the Notre Dame game.
Yeah.
Certainly with that New Hampshire split in there, I'm curious how hard we're going after that Michigan State and Notre Dame game. Try to get that South Alabama win. And then see where you are.
They do get Toledo at home on the schedule, but they've got to go to Ohio and to Western Michigan. They got Northern Illinois at home, but really their success is going to be if they can get to the 4 or 5 wins in the conference, and that's going to be interesting. And how much juice are they going to have left after going to those pretty much losses on the road to the non-conference
The other
games.
problem with that Toledo game is they're coming off a bye because they're playing it at end of week on a Friday instead of the midweek. So they're going to play. Toledo's going to have that short midweek game. Actually, sort of have 2 weeks theoretically off than 1 week off, and
I'm more on the selling end of the Central Michigan team. I think they're very inferior to Eastern, and I don't know. We'll see.
I will say it always seems to have talent. It always seems to underachieve.
Yeah.
It seems to be just a universal thing at Central Michigan. Ball State here, they just sort of live in the 4 to 6 win region.
Yeah.
I don't really know what to make of this team. Some guys return from a pretty poor team. I like the running back here, but I don't know. I can't get a real feel. I will say I do like Mike New. I think he's a good coach. He seems to get maximum out of a team that's never, loaded with talent. So what do you make of Ball State's here?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to be moving up anymore. They had I was on them big 2-3 years ago. I think their offense was really playing well, but they kind of lack that firepower now. And the 5-7 last year, I think they could regress even more this year, potentially moving to the bottom of the division. I think the over-under's at 4.5. I'd almost have to lean under here.
Yeah, I think I just respect New. He finds ways to steal wins. He's one of those where you don't like betting on those midweek games because you're like,
he'll win a 55-53 shootout weird game.
You know, he'll lose a game the week before, 32-7, and you'll be like, Ball State sucks. And then the next week they're playing a 55-52 game going into overtime, and you're like, what the hell happened here? But I'm curious to see where they fall, if it's one of those years where they can get that sort of 7-win mark, or it's hovering much like last year where it's sort of 4 or 5 wins and they just sort of can't defend and don't have enough offense to sort of keep up with these teams. All right, next up in the MAC, Western Michigan. This team I don't see much promise in. Their offense returns a handful of guys. It's Lance Taylor's first year. 5-7 last year.
They're replacing their whole defensive squad.
I maybe there's something there. It's hard to say. I know they're going to bring in some transfers, so I would be surprised if they weren't towards the bottom. Where I think Central Michigan and Eastern Michigan have some sort of at least 7-8 win promise. I think this team would max out sort of last year's record at about 5 wins.
Yeah, I don't even see them getting that high. I think they're going to be lucky to scrap up 1 to 2 conference wins here. I think we're going to see major regression, and see if Lance Taylor can get something going. But this isn't a team I can see winning big on a fluke Wednesday night game. I think this is a team that they're going to fall off, and they're going to be near the bottom.
Yeah, I think so. So we'll see what Lance Taylor can do. First sort of head coaching job, see how he moves. Sort of always our favorite, the Ohio Bobcats. I think other than Toledo, they're always ones who's probably pretty consistent, even when you think they're going to be bad.
Yeah.
They still manage to find their way to, sort of 8 wins. Last year, really, really good, 10-4, 7-1 in conference.
Yeah.
They really got that mojo going towards that. I want to say towards November, right at the start of November, they just started rolling through people. Does that continue this year, or do you think they'll regress back? Because I think last year people thought they were going to be down, and they really started.
I think you were the one that was on this team before I was last year, but this is my team this year. I like this team better than Toledo. I think they've got the best player in the conference in Curtis Rourke. Tim Albin, I love what he's doing with this Ohio team. I like them. This will probably be one of my futures. Last I looked, they're sitting at about 350 to win the conference for a team that.
Now they're in the tougher conference. That is.
Yeah, they're in the harder division, whereas Toledo's kind of on their own in theirs. But I like this Ohio team.
Yeah, I like them too. I think I'll probably be on them again. I think once again they're a little bit underrated on their win total number at 7.5. Now their schedule, I don't think it's that hard.
I don't think the non-conference is that tough.
Granted, I'll say this. It's a lot of travel early. You're going to San Diego State. You're back home at Long Island. Then you're dropping down to Florida Atlantic. And then
get to host Iowa State.
I don't know who made that scheduling error.
Maybe get a big home upset there.
Yeah, I should probably say my eye is on that right now. Iowa State randomly going to Ohio. It is mid-September. But, I've always been an Ohio State, not Ohio State. I've never been an Ohio State guy. I just always find this team sort of at least achieves its goal. So it will minimum 7 wins, and I think they could hit that 10-win mark if they can sort of find their play style here, and I think that'll continue. So once again, big on Ohio. For me, my Emmy of Ohio, where do we sit with them? I think, did you like them last year?
Yeah.
I think this was your team last year.
I lost a few wagers on them.
I sort of remember, and then I don't want to say they underachieved, but they certainly didn't reach what I think we thought they would.
They were one of those weird teams that they would win games they weren't supposed to, and then lose games they weren't supposed to, and it was kind of up and down and very.
You never knew what you were
very
quite getting.
chaotic, and I always ended up on the wrong end.
Yeah, I think that's what I remember most. You just always being on the wrong end of whatever you bet Miami on.
Oh, Miami's terrible. Let's take the other team. Oh, Miami's good again. I'm going to ride them next week, and then they'd lose. So it was up, down, up, down, up, down, and they typically perform pretty well. They return a lot of starters on the defense, so we'll see what they can do. I think the schedule's pretty favorable. They get Toledo at home, they get Buffalo at home, but they do have to go to Ohio, who's the main division rival in there. So we'll see how it goes. But Miami,
but
okay.
I think that's where they played so bad last year in conference. It was random wins and losses. You sort of just. They'd lose to weird teams, and you'd be like, why is this team losing to it? And then, they'd go play the top teams pretty well. So just hard to see where this team sort of falls. Probably.
I think they're probably anywhere from the 6 to 8 win range, about kind of where they were last year.
Do you think they could make that Ohio jump and grab? Because I think the top team in here probably have to have 9, maybe 10 might be a little bit of stretch because the depth is, but I think they'll at least have to have 9.
Yeah, I think there's some teams that might be able to push Ohio in this division. I don't know if Miami's that team. I think there's some other teams in this division that I like better.
All right, let's go to
one
mine.
Of those teams.
Buffalo Bulls. Started out a little slow and seemed to find that momentum towards the middle of the season. I think I tipped you off a little bit on that. I was like, I don't remember what game it was. It felt like a little Northeast game where they went down and played a Maryland or something like that. And I was like, I watch this team. It's not bad. It does 1 or 2 dumb things a game that cost them games. And then they got on a ride.
Well, this coach is finally starting to find his own after coming in a couple years ago and really getting some of his own players in. They got to replace a lot of this offense, but it's the same Buffalo that we've liked in the past.
Well,
they
that's
like
what
to
I was
run the
going
ball.
to say.
They know their identity.
Even though the coach is not the one who was there, it still runs pretty much the same offense. So they are pretty plug and play as long as they have solid guys in there. I'm curious if they could improve on that 7-6. I think they could maybe get to the 8-win mark. I just don't know if they can sort of get to that peak area of Ohio and Toledo.
They're going to have to get their wins early because they end on a really tough stretch. They've got they host Ohio, they got to go to Miami of Ohio, and then they got Eastern Michigan. I think those are all 3 losable games there at the stretch that if they want to finish near the top, they're going to have to get a couple of the wins there.
Yeah, weird little Wisconsin, Fordham, Liberty start off. Fordham, they should be okay, but this is also a team that's had a little trouble with the subdivision. I believe they lost a subdivision team last year at the start, and that's what I think threw people off because then they went and played a couple of the top teams and started playing with them. And I'm curious if sort of this coach is sort of a 6 to 8 type win coach and not a sort of win the title type coach. So it'll be a really sort of telling year, I think, for Buffalo. But also they have that home field advantage, when teams go up there. They don't want to go up there. Certainly, midweek at night, that's just not a fun place to be. Winds are blowing, weather is cold. Bowling Green, overachieved last year. We say overachieved, but I think when we watched them play a couple times, especially early, and we were like, this team isn't that bad. I know everybody thinks they're like the worst team, but you watch them play, they play good football. Will that continue this year?
We'll see. This is definitely one of those teams that falls in that clump that could go up, could go down.
Well, I was going to say their win total sits at 5, which sort of tells me
that's Vegas a little bit of a drop off.
Has no idea what this team's going to be. It's either going to be, Northern Illinois and win 3 games from last year. It's going to overachieve and win 7 or 8. So
Well,
they just stick it at 5.
They have Ohio early, and then they got to go on the road at Miami of Ohio and at Buffalo in conference before they get to some more of the winnable games. So they're going to have to kind of really stick with it and power through, which might be their MO. They're pretty strong defensively. Yes. They don't bring back a lot of starters, so we'll see how that changeover goes. But they were great last year. They had a lot of they were a team last year. If you had taken some underdog money lines, yes. they were 8-4 against the spread as underdogs. So pretty good value there. Maybe even get that again this year. Yeah,
they were one of those few teams who they didn't play sort of the typical MAC in the 40s. It was sort of a grindy type of football that wasn't as quite as explosive. And I think that sort of threw people off. I think they thought they were getting sort of a passable defense with a offense, and they got a pretty good defense.
They were playing better defensively.
With a okay offense. I think their offense was what we thought it was, but I think that defense really stepped up. Curious if that will continue on, or, they sort of go back to where they sort of lived for a handful of years, after Dino left there.
Now we're getting to the bottom of the barrel here.
All right.
This is a team, they're not great, but I'm eyeing the over. I think they can get a little frisky here. It's at 3.5, I think.
I can't remember. I took a couple of the ones that were like 1.5s last year. I might have hit this one because they got a second win.
Well, they came on at the end of the year. I can't remember. They upset somebody.
Yeah.
Was it Buffalo?
It might have been Buffalo.
They beat somebody good in the last week or two of the season, and everyone was like, whoa, they only won 2 games, and one of them was against one of the better teams, and I'm sad I can't remember it right now.
I think one of them cost both of us some sort of money line parlay that lost us a lot of money because we just throw the random team versus Akron in there, and then they got the win. I will say I'm not a huge Joe Moorhead guy. That being said, Akron's probably his level, so if he wants to be a so-so offensive coach, this is probably the land to be in, but I don't know.
I think they're going to finish better than last because I think the last place team is the team we're moving up to next.
I will say their win total is at 3.5.
Yeah. Morgan State, that's a win.
Yes.
1. And then, Kent State probably. That's another.
I don't know if I give them any wins other than maybe Morgan State. They might be in a couple here and there, but I'd struggle to take the over 3.5 in this.
I think they're going to be one of the more improved teams in the conference.
I think we'll pretty much know the opening game at Temple. If that one's not a win, I think the 4 probably gets a little tight there, but we'll go to Kent State. Kenny Burns takes over here. I liked this Kent State team the last couple years. New era, probably a
brand new team. They've lost everybody. Complete
and utter rebuild. So it's really sort of hard to know what to make of this. I guess they're going to be bad, but we have no real clue of what's coming in or out. So what do you make of Kent State?
I think they're going to be the Akron of last year. I think they're going to fall to the bottom of the conference. Their win total is set at 2.5, and I don't think that over's hit. And I see 1 win on their schedule. And
I will say they did not schedule per always Kent State, who always granted they fund their program because they always play 3 or 4 really big time teams, and it doesn't change. They play Central Florida, Arkansas, and Fresno State, so those are probably 3 losses. Might be able to sneak the Central Connecticut one out, but nonetheless, probably just wait and see on Kent State. Maybe we'll know a little bit more next year on where this sort of program heads up here. All right. I guess we're out of the MAC, and we're going to... Well, I didn't get you think Ohio's going to win the MAC, don't you?
Yeah, Ohio's my play. I think if you're getting anywhere from 250 to 3-1, I think that's really good value.
Yeah, I think I'm going to stick with you on Ohio here. I think that's the play.
I really love their quarterback. I like their coach.
I know Toledo has probably the better players, but it seems like Ohio finds ways to win games, and Toledo found ways to lose games last year.
Exactly.
All right, let's go to the independents. We'll talk a couple of these. Notre Dame, sort of a weird,
hot and cold. They had the weird loss to Marshall last year.
where they threw. But as soon as they sort of found their offense, I don't think anybody questioned their defense pretty much most of the year. You know, their losses all came because their offense gave the other team points. Do they improve upon last year? I will say
they got a good bowl win.
Yeah, I did like the way Marcus Freeman took that.
Yeah.
You know, sort of 5-game stretch to start the season and turn that into a positive and really close strong. Do they continue to close strong here?
I think their schedule's favorable this year. You know, they get to host Ohio State this year. They host USC, so they don't have, you know, they do have to go to Clemson because they've got this weird ACC hybrid kind of schedule. But I think there's room for improvement here on this 9-4 year. Weird little opener overseas in Ireland against Navy. That should be a fun one. But like I said, they won their bowl game against South Carolina last year, and I think they're going to ride that momentum. And I don't see them dropping a game to, say, a Marshall this season. So, I think they can move up a little bit.
Yeah, the win total seems to hover between 8.5 and 9 here. I think if you can get that 8.5 number, I think this is a pretty solid, easy 9-win team.
Yeah, they got the 9 with the bowl win last year. I think they can get the 9 in regular season and with a potential for 10.
And I think this defense will once again be good. It's sort of what they can find on offense. And if they don't turn it over, which is what happened towards the end of last year, they just stopped turning the ball over, and they found enough points. I look for it to be a pretty good sort of Notre Dame year where they could maybe make probably not the playoff, but maybe one of those New Year's Six bowls.
Yeah, I'm really only seeing one for sure, probably mark it down loss. I think that's the game against Ohio State, but that's in South Bend. So, you know, weird things can happen.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to the ACC yet, but I can tell you now, I don't know what to make of Clemson.
Yeah.
So, you know, it will be interesting. The rest are all winnable games. So, all right, we'll go to Army. I don't think we need to hit this.
I don't think we need to stick on any other independents.
A ton. 6-6.
They are what they are.
That's pretty much what it'll be. You know what they're going to be. They'll play hard. They'll run the option. They'll give teams some problems. Defense probably won't be able to hold up versus very top teams, but teams who can't prepare for them, they'll win games. It will probably be between 6 to 8 wins, and if a couple things go right, they could probably climb to 9 wins, I would say. What do you make of Army here?
Yeah, I mean they are what they are pretty much year in and year out. They're gonna run their option. They're gonna run the ball. They're gonna be in a chance for an upset against a team that never plays a team with their offense. You know, I look at they got to go to Death Valley LSU in the middle of October. Hopefully LSU's prepared for that. We'll see. You know, every team seems to have trouble outside of the teams that always play Army because they're just not prepared for this kind of offense. So, but yeah, I think they're kind of just middle of the road.
I will say that Holy Cross game on November 11th, Holy Cross, really, really good subdivision team. Probably second favorite to win the subdivision.
Taking a dog upset over Army there.
They were in the championship game versus, you know, of course, North Dakota State. Holy Cross brings back that quarterback who's, you know, got a little buzz. So maybe in, 3 months? Keep that in mind for an upset pick. Now, granted, that's towards the end of the year for Holy Cross, so they might not be so focused on it and more focused on getting into their playoffs healthy and not randomly beating Army. So, we go to my boys from UConn last year.
You hit some winners on
I
this.
rode this stupid UConn team with Jim Morris.
Well, wasn't there over? I think this is one of the teams where their over/under was at 2.5, and then they won 6 games.
And
so.
I kept writing their weird little money lines because they kept pumping them up. And, I think any past shows or anybody who's ever known me knows I'm not a huge Jim Morris fan. But nonetheless, this sort of fits. He can probably make some sort of bad to okay players good enough to win games versus other bad, pretty poor teams, which is what they did. Can they improve on the 6-7 record, or is it going to be win 6? Because they did get hot, and a couple things sort of fell their way towards the end. But what do you make of the UConn Huskies? Do we get another miracle run here?
I don't know. I'd say probably 6 is the ceiling.
A lot of guys are returning. I will say that.
I think if they can repeat what they did last year is the ceiling.
Yes.
I'd say more realistic expectations are about 4 to 5 wins, which is right at the line.
Yes.
They're so volatile. I wouldn't bet this line because I could easily see them only winning 1 game this season as well. So, we'll see.
I will say they were 9-4 against the spread, so which is why I made a lot of money on them. And I think those 4 losses were all like the first 4 games of the season. I think by those last like 6 or 7, they just kept covering games. I kept riding them. I was a big UConn Huskies fan there for. It was a big UConn year because I think I told you college basketball like a month into the season. I was like, I think this UConn team's kind of good, and they ended up winning it. I don't even know what to do with this. UMass. They probably should be a subdivision team, and even then, I don't know if they'd be a good subdivision team.
Yeah, I don't see. They may not have a win on this schedule.
I throw a chance at New Mexico State. I wouldn't even, like I said, I don't even think I'd put the Merrimack down as a win. Like I said, I don't know if this would be a good subdivision team. They'd probably be in the 500 border. Anything here on UMass?
I've got nothing on
other
UMass.
than they're going to have a lot of 50-point spreads. You can choose to play them or not.
I think I dabbled with that a little bit last year. I think I hit a couple like plus 40 somethings on with them.
What was there against the spread? 5 and 7.
Yeah,
so
I think I hit a couple really big spreads with them.
That sort of plays
But
out. Just
you will get some astronomical spreads with UMass. I remember some that were just like that's definitely going to hit, and then there was some where I thought plus 50 would hit, and then they lose by 60.
Yes.
So
it's one of those things. I think it will always UMass always probably in and around 5 and 7, 6 and 6 against the spread because it's just random if teams want to cover or not. That gives our independent preview. Let's jump into some bigger teams here. Let's go into the AAC. Do we call it a shake-up here of the AAC, or do we just sort of new life as a couple of the teams go into the Big 12 and a couple of the Conference USA teams come into the AAC?
Well, it's interesting.
The teams that came in, I think, are good football teams.
I thought they brought some good teams in. And, it's interesting, the dynamics of these divisions or these conferences, because I think it wasn't that long ago we had teams leaving the AAC for the Conference USA. It's because Conference USA was more notable conference.
Yes.
And now I think the AAC has surpassed Conference USA, and we've got teams leaving that conference. And I thought they brought some good teams in here.
Certainly ones we are always been a fan of. And we'll kick that right off the bat. I think
this is a team very near and dear to my heart.
I think ever since we started this show, the UTSA Roadrunners have been our sort of quasi team.
They do play my Vols this year, though.
Granted, Frank Harris will eventually have to leave college, so that has been helpful towards our love.
One of the best players in football. I do not sleep on Frank Harris and the Roadrunners.
Yes, I love this team. I love their coach, Jeff Traylor. So comes off Stephen F. Austin in the subdivision, who was a dominant team. I just like this team. Once again, I think they're going to be really, really elite. They just missed a couple upsets towards the start of the season. You mentioned it. They played Tennessee. One of those upsets
I'm nervous as of all fans.
was Houston last year that they just missed. I want to see where this team is. As always, it's a little bit, can that defense hold the line enough to get this offense enough points? Do you make them the favorite here in the ACC? Not ACC, AAC, as they jump into this conference? Are they? Do you put them ahead of a couple of the sort of more notable teams in the AAC here?
I kind of put them probably just a notch below Tulane. This Tulane team is really good. But I like Frank Harris. Their offensive line is experienced. They lost some receivers to the NFL draft, but I think the way this offense works, some of these receivers are going to just be able to be plug and play, and Frank Harris is going to find them. It's interesting, they're bringing a new offensive coordinator, Justin Burke, who played quarterback at NC State and Louisville. But he's been with the team. I think he was quarterback's coach. He's been with the team, but he takes over as offensive coordinator.
I don't see much of a drop-off there.
But, I think it's going to come down to the last week of the regular season. It's going to be a huge one. It's at Tulane last week. I think that could decide the conference. But I like you said, if they come out shooting and get an upset, at Houston or at Tennessee, watch out. This team could be there.
You can tell just by the odds in the AAC. Tulane 210, UT San Antonio 290, SMU 340, and then you got a little bit of a drop off on FAU and Memphis at 650 and 800. But you can talk me into those teams sort of. FAU closed pretty well last year towards the end of the season, and Memphis, had a disappointing year for them, but I think they'll sort of bounce back, and new coaching into Memphis, where I think they'll be back to where Memphis has sort of been the previous, years before that. But one last run here for the UT San Antonio Roadrunners.
I was a little disappointed how they finished the season last year with the bowl loss to your team, Troy. It was a close one, but I like UTSA, and I probably... It's going to be tough to pick them over Tulane because I really like this Tulane team.
All right, next up for us...
Shit. Cut.
Just pick the view. Yeah, just click that view.
Okay.
All right, open it up. There we go.
Did it really go to SMU next?
Yeah.
Why is he doing? Is that how he picked it?
Yeah, probably so.
He's got Tulane third.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Ready? 3, 2, 1. All right. Next up is SMU. Another one of those. I thought they were a little disappointing last year. They always looked good.
They scored.
But they never seemed to win the games where you were entertained by them.
Yeah, they actually led the conference in scoring last year. But their defense was atrocious. They gave up 33.8 points per game.
Here's my question. That's always the question. They bring a lot of those guys back. Is that a good thing, or is that just we're bringing a lot of bad defenders back?
I think their schedule's more favorable this year. They don't have Tulane or UTSA on their schedule, so they have that potential to win the conference by, or at least getting the conference championship game without playing either one of those teams.
So Rhett Lashley took this team over after last year after the coach went to TCU. And like we said, we thought they underachieved a little bit last year. Yeah. Does it start, this is Texas, does it start to get a little heaty for the coach here if SMU sort of doesn't achieve? I think with the conference moving right now towards sort of SMU being one of a team that should always contend in this conference. If it's another sort of 7-6 year, we score a lot of points, but we end up losing a lot of games that we shouldn't lose. do they start to look to sort of upgrade here at SMU, or do you think they give this guy a little bit of a longer leash?
I think they're going to give him a little bit of time, especially because I see them improving this year. And, you know, speaking of TCU, they brought in a wide receiver transfer in Jordan Hudson, who's going to bolster an already strong offense. And look for that game to get ugly at TCU in the fourth week of the season.
It always does. So, I think there's...
I think their schedule spells an 8-9 win season, so I definitely don't think the coach is going to get in trouble for that.
I think they can grab on here. That Louisiana Tech game opening week is, I think, of vital importance. See if Louisiana Tech bounces back from sort of off year. SMU needs to win that game. They don't need to start slow out of the gate because they do go to Oklahoma after that. Now, what Oklahoma's going to be, we don't know. But, if you can bounce off that Louisiana Tech game, maybe you can go into that Oklahoma game thinking you can sort of spring an upset then.
Yeah. But the good thing is after they played, after they go to TCU, they get Charlotte at home, and then they get a bye week to prep for the rest of the conference schedule. And I think they could make a really good run through the rest of those teams.
Yeah, definitely so. All right. Next up, we'll go to the next favorite. We talked about it a little last year. I thought Tulane would be better than what they were going to be. They turned out to be better than what everybody...
It was probably the best season a Group of Five team, on par with the best season a Group of Five team has ever had in college football.
Especially because I think people thought they were going to be really, really down, and they turned it. And I was one of those who was like, I think they, Willie Fritz, good coach, wins games. I did not think they were going to be 12-2 and be making a New Year's Six Bowls.
Well, and not only making the New Year's Six Bowl, beating USC in a bowl game, Group of Six, Tulane. One thing I really want to point out, and I circled this when I was doing my research. How the heck are they hosting Mississippi in week 2?
Well, we call those bad decisions. We call those...
that could spell another great season for Tulane and a bad season for Mississippi. That's a great game right there.
Yeah, I'm pumped up for that one. That'll be an interesting
If I'm
game.
Getting points with Tulane at home against Mississippi, I'm probably taking them.
Yeah, I will say that their schedule to start the first 3 is not cupcakes. Granted, South Alabama at home. You mentioned Ole Miss, and then at Southern Miss. That's a big 3. They get a little bit of a break at Nichols, and then UAB. So it's. I don't know if 12-2 is going to be there. And
they do bring their quarterback back, but they're replacing running backs, wide receivers. It's going to be really tough to repeat last year.
But I think 8, 9, 10 wins they can cruise through, because after they get past that North Texas game, it's Rice, East Carolina, Tulsa, Florida Atlantic. Close with UTC.
Yeah, like I said, they're going to have that one. That I bet it's already circled on their calendar, that closing game against UTSA. That could decide. I think SMU, with their schedule, is going to be in the championship game, and I think it's going to be one of Tulane or UTSA, the other one in there.
Their win total number, though, at 9.5, I don't think I take that. That seems really, really high for the schedule that they have.
Yeah, like you said, they could potentially lose their first 3 games.
Yeah.
And then who knows, can they keep it in the road after that?
Yeah, but you will know that they'll always be good at home. Even when they were bad, Tulane, it was very difficult to go in there and win football games. So curious to see how they bounce back. And this is here. Memphis, 7-6 last year. Really sort of disappointing. I think this is, like I said earlier, I think this is probably Silverfield's last sort of chance to right the ship here. It's gotten worse each and every year since Memphis had sort of stabilized and cast their lot as sort of one of the better, I don't know how you say small schools, because Memphis is not a small school, but one of the littler schools that punches above their weight, and it seemed to gone worse and worse and worse every year for Silverfield. So does Memphis here bounce back and find themselves back on ground that we sort of had gotten used to them playing on?
They are going for their 4th straight bowl game this year, which is, I think, pretty good for Memphis. One thing I look for is they bringing in a big time he was the conference player of the year in his conference last year from Old Dominion.
Yeah.
Blake Watson, running back, and I think he's going to fit into this Memphis offense really well.
Memphis has been elite. They've had a top end running back.
Yeah,
so.
and they bring back their quarterback last year, Seth Hennigan, who threw for 3,500 plus yards. So I think their offense is going to be there, but their defense was really lacking last year. They were giving up 30 points a game again last year. One thing I found humorous, I was going through the AAC. I think there's only about 2 teams that held people under about 28 points a game. So if you like overs, the AAC is probably your conference to look if they're not juiced. They're probably all going to be set pretty high.
I can already tell you, I think we're getting a lot of those 70-point over-unders, and I'm going, we don't take 70-point overs, we take 70-point unders.
I do say their defense is bad, but this is, that's something I can say about a lot of these AAC teams. But if they want to make a jump, they're going to have to stifle down a defense. That's what separated Tulane last year was their defense. So I think if Memphis wants to make that jump from 6-6 and get into a bowl to maybe 8-9 wins within their good years, they're going to have to play some better defense.
I think that's where
the running game may help them with that.
That's where I've seen their drop off. Their defense was never great, but it got turnovers, it forced sacks. It got plays.
They played ball control.
Yeah, and then they basically ran you to death and had some receivers who could, hit huge plays, and it just seems to have gotten worse and worse and worse under Silverfield. So I'm curious if you can find a first coach fired in the AAC, but if this starts out poorly, I think he might be on that list. All right, let's go to Florida Atlantic.
Tom Herman coming in.
Herman taking over here. Probably back into where he likes to win games as a underdog. This team was. It started slow and sort of found its footing there towards the end. Does that continue this year?
Well,
and let's say fringe contender for this AAC.
I don't know about contender for the AAC. I think we've reached our drop-off point after Memphis. But I think they can make a bowl game. Okay. I look somehow a quarterback that played for him while he was coaching at Texas, Casey Thompson. He's been around. He's been to Texas. He's been in Nebraska, and now he comes to Florida Atlantic with his old head coach.
It should be said he hasn't been good at any of those places. He couldn't even get on the field at Nebraska. So
I think he started a few games and then got benched.
Yes.
But Florida Atlantic, another chance. But they lost some of their. They bring back 10 returning defensive starters, but I think they've lost a couple to the transfer portal, and then they've got to have some playmakers step up on offense, especially at the wide receiver position. I say they bring in Casey Thompson, but they're going to need some wide receivers to help out with that.
I don't think T.Y. Hilton is eligible to come back. I don't know. He might not be doing anything.
I think the ceiling for this team is 6 wins. I think they can. Wins. I think maybe 7, but I think 6 is where they can get to.
I'm curious. I thought first glance and reading some stuff on them, I thought they might could get hot here or there and get to 7 or 8, but it's one of those things where I need to see them.
But they do bring in a great coach.
Yeah, that's what I like. Tom Herman.
He had a kind of a
I didn't like him at Texas. I think this is where he does his best work here at schools like this. We'll go to my darling from last year. 8-5 last year, East Carolina. A little disappointing in conference, but nonetheless, I'm a little scared we're going to drop back down a little bit here. We lost a lot of people from that team last year, but I'm curious if Houston maybe can just sort of keep this going. 8 seems a bit extreme, but I think they could stay around 6 and 7 if things go right. What do you make of this?
Vegas has got the line at 5.5, so Vegas definitely sees a drop off here. They're losing.
They have a good home field too. So.
Yeah, but they're losing their starting quarterback.
Yes.
Their starting running back. They're losing 2,000-yard wide receivers. Their offense averaged 32 points a game last year. There's no way they're repeating that this year, replacing all that talent. And last I checked, the quarterback hasn't even been determined yet. They've got a battle.
We're in first 4 weeks of the season. A lot of rotation.
They've got Mason Garcia and Alex Finn both vying for the job, and if they're going to pull off some wins here, their defense is going to have to step up because their offense is definitely going to drop off. No way they're going to average over 30 points a game, replacing all that talent.
Yeah, I just looked at those last three. If they have it together, FAU, Navy, Tulsa, maybe come in there 4-4, 4-5, and get a couple wins if they're playing well. I don't think they'll start the year all that great. I mean, they didn't even start last year all that great, losing that stupid South Carolina game where they had 45 turnovers and still found a way to lose a game.
Yeah.
But I think I like Mike Houston, and I think he sort of maximizes talent. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious how he does here, replacing sort of the guys he brought in his first sort of class, and if it can just be a churn thing where they're sort of 6 to 8 wins every year.
Yeah, it really just depends on if the newcomers on offense can perform like all the guys they're replacing.
Yeah, definitely receiver room going to be hurt because a couple of those guys. I wouldn't say NFL stars, but I think they'll hover around the league for a little bit. Navy, do we call it a rebuilding year? Ken's out.
Yeah, I was sad to see Ken go because he'd been there, 15 years?
He'd been there a lot. I was a teenager when he was there. So he'd been there a while.
Maybe 20 years?
Yeah, he'd been there a very, very long time.
But they bring in the defensive coordinator that was already there,
yes,
and Brian Newberry. So
it makes you wonder why they even fired the coach. But
I don't think you're going to see a lot of change here. So why fire the guy? But anyway.
They might throw the ball 3-4 more times.
I will say, I pointed out the bad defenses in the conference. This is one of the few teams. That has a really good defense, but their offense sucks.
Yes, that's correct. That's why I said
they only averaged 20 points a game.
I think they'll run the option, but it might be a little more of a modern, let's call it modern day option, where there are a couple more pass trinkets in there.
Another team, this is another one. They don't have Tulane, they don't have UTSA on their schedule. That's beneficial.
So that definitely. Their over-under number sits at 6.5, which I think is factored into that. I don't know if they can make that jump, but like you said, defensively, they probably are, I want to say, on that upper tier of teams in the AAC. So maybe they sneak out a couple games here, and that.
I think that game at Memphis, week 3, is huge.
And they always play that early morning sort of start, so sometimes they get a little bit of advantage there. So maybe they can get to that win total, but I think it'll be a real struggle. It wouldn't be something I'd bet really, really heavy here for sure. But we'll see how they do without Ken in there. Definite new era.
I'm kind of sad.
I am too, because I think I just got used to seeing him over there in his sideline
with the lay.
All right, we should probably go to another team we've always sort of had a soft spot for. Maybe not as much as the Roadrunners, but I think it's because we make a lot of money off North Texas, because they seem to get beneficial odds and nobody pays attention to them. And then they're one of those teams that's always around 6 to 8 wins. 7-7 last year, got off to a pretty slow start, had a pretty difficult schedule to start the year, and then once they hit conference play, they started playing real good football. Coach leaves, brings in a new guy here.
I'm excited about this guy, though.
Are you?
Yeah. I'll tell you about Eric Morse a little bit. He played wide receiver for Mike Leach at Texas Tech. Very offensive-minded coach. He was actually, we spoke about Texas State bringing in the coach from Incarnate Word last year. This guy, Eric Morris, he coached Incarnate Word the year before in 2021. He's been the offensive coordinator at Washington State last year. Very offensive-minded. But so I'm excited to see. I think they're going to score points, but their defense... Again, back to the terrible defenses in the AAC. They gave up over 6 yards a snap last year, which is not going to win. They were 7-7. They actually were near the top of the conference. So that just goes to show you that nobody in the conference plays defense that well. But I think they could repeat what they did last year. Yeah, maybe.
Well, I was on them last year as sort of a long shot contender for Conference USA. They fulfilled that in conference, non-conference. Like I said, they got off to a slow start. Can they get off to a little bit better start here? I know we've
got to
cut the line, but do you think if this offense, it's always hard for a first year, do you think they could be sort of a long, let's call them a long shot contender? Because I think they play better football than the last couple teams we talked about. So I don't know.
They've got a really rough stretch into October, into November. They've got Tulane, Memphis, UTSA, SMU all in a row. Yeah. That for that conference, that could be murderer's row. Potentially losing all 4 of those games. They do bring in a quarterback transfer.
They also close with UAB. So
their starting quarterback is going to be a guy, Chandler Rogers, quarterback out of ULM, that's coming in. It's really just going to see how this offense works with the new head coach, I think.
Yeah, it's probably a wait and see. I probably won't be as aggressive on them as I have been in the past.
Yeah.
Just because I want to.
The potential for the drop-off is there.
Yeah.
I think they're doing good if they can repeat what they did last year.
Their number sits at 6.5, so it's sort of right where they think they were last year. I'll be interested to see how they go. We go to Temple here. Hard read on this one. Not a great year in the AAC. Probably too sort of big a jump, not quality. But I watched them a handful of times last year. I thought they were a little bit better than their record. I'm curious if that continues. This has sort of been a school that, when it gets the right coach in there, they can sort of get decent players into that Philly area. What do you make here out of Temple? Do they get to make that jump? Their win total goes to 5 here, so they think there's going to be a little bit of jump. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm seeing it. Their defense, another defense struggling, allowed 200 yards rushing per game last year. Their leading tackler on defense transferred to Wisconsin. He had like 20 tackles for loss almost, and he's gone. They do bring back the rest of their defense, but it was a terrible defense, and they lost their one good player off of it. I'm not sure if I'm seeing 5-5. The 3-9 was a little low for them last year. The 5.5 wins is about typical for them. So maybe they creep back up closer to it, but I'd have to lean more under.
Yeah, it doesn't look like they have enough what I'd call guaranteed wins to hit that kind of high number. I'll be curious to see how they sort of grow from last year's team. Like I said, the record wasn't great, but the handful of times I watched them, I thought they were a little better than what their record was. And another one of those teams, they play in the NFL stadium, so when they get that noon game at home and literally no one's there, it doesn't make for a fun first half. I always take first half unders in Temple noon games.
Yeah, they're definitely not going to be competing in the conference.
No.
They'll be trying to make a bowl game. That's their goal, I believe.
I think so. So we'll move to Rice here. 5-8. I thought they'd be a little bit better than what their record was last year, but I don't think I'd call it a disappointing season. What do you see from Rice here? They return a lot of guys, I will say that.
Yeah, and guess who they're bringing in at quarterback? They've got former USC, Georgia, West Virginia quarterback JT Daniels coming into play here.
Well, he might finally get to actually play a little bit.
Well, I think he started last year at West Virginia, but then he got hurt, I believe. He never really got to see the field much at Georgia.
I watched him at West Virginia. It wasn't exactly like he was lighting the field up.
But they did get to a bowl game last year with they only had their 5 wins, but they did get to a bowl game.
It pays to be a smart school on that sort of front.
Yeah, so I think this is a team looking to get some momentum, and they bring in, I guess you could say, an experienced quarterback. I think he's going to be good in this conference. But again, defense gave up 35 points per game, so they're going to have to outscore people.
Yes.
So we'll see if they can do that. The line was at 6.5. You said.
I believe so.
So I really don't see that.
Yeah. I think sort of they were. I just thought they were disappointing last year. They had a little bit. It's hard to say higher expectation. I think people thought they'd win sort of 7 games last year. They only ended up winning 5. That defense was sort of part of the problem. They could put up some flashy offensive numbers, but I'm curious to see if there's any improvement this year, as it sort of stays the same with Rice. 4 to 6 is where they live. All right, let's go to UAB. Probably the most interesting sort of team.
Interesting coaching hire.
Go out of the box, hire Trent Dilfer,
who's been coaching high school academy.
He's been training quarterbacks, coaching high school academy. I don't want to say he has no knowledge of football. He's probably really, really smart. And when he was, an announcer on like ESPN and the other shows, he was actually one of the ones I could stand listening to him because he actually...
And he did win a Super Bowl.
And he did win a Super Bowl. The question probably becomes, is he ready for this? Because this is kind of a big jump. UAB under Bill was a very good, solid program, and I think you thought the drop-off last year wasn't going to be as big, and it sort of was. They went from throwing out 10-2 years to 7-6. Does it continue to fall here, or can Dilfer,
It's a big question mark because they're turning over their whole team. They've lost entire offensive line. The whole starting offensive line from last year's gone. They also lost their starting quarterback and their starting running back. Yes. So it's really just a question mark on the talent and if they can perform and what Dilfer's going to bring.
And that's the other thing. Dilfer sort of has an in with all those sort of high school prospects because that's what he's been doing.
Yeah.
He's been training those kids. So this is just a wild card. I have no clue what to expect.
I think they could be terrible. They could be near the top.
You could tell me they could go back to winning, 10 games a year, and I'd be And you could tell me they continue their slide, and it's 2-3 wins, and it's going badly. I have no clue quite what to make of this. This is when I'm watching and seeing and make a judgment. 5-6 games into the season.
I don't see them winning the conference. I don't think they can go win at Tulane. I don't think they can go win at UTSA. But I mean, the rest of the conference games. Yeah. They could win and they could put them right there in a bowl game.
It's another one that has a tough home field as well. I think that's the thing. Some of these are hard to handicap because a lot of these teams are difficult to play at home. So it'll be interesting to see where they go. Our friends Charlotte.
Newcomer.
Yeah, newcomer. Probably same comer. Charlotte sort of lives in the 2 to 4 win territory.
I've got them. I haven't made any future bets yet, but I've got them bottom of the conference.
Why is a little confusing. It's one of the huge big cities in the South in a pretty big talented area, but they've just never really been good, and they've gone through coaches.
Talk about question mark. They brought in over 30 transfers this year. They've lost almost their entire roster from last year,
which wasn't very good.
So I mean that could spell success, but they allowed 40 points a game last year. That's not going to win football games.
I'm assuming bad, even though their unis and colors are cool, but. We'll see. New guy, but it seems to be a new guy every 3 or 4 years, and it's always between 2 or 4 wins.
Let's not linger on Charlotte too much here.
Okay, South Florida, the once proud program that was a new guy again. I feel like I say a new guy again at South Florida pretty much every year for the last couple. They were awful last year. It's a hotbed of talent. They shouldn't be ever bad, but they've been bad for a while now. Any improvement?
Well, there's only one way to go, and it's up, because you can't get much worse than 1-11. Offensive coordinator at Tennessee last year, Alex Golish, comes in as head coach. He knows the Florida area well because he came up with Heupel at Central Florida. So he knows the recruiting hotbed.
I believe the coach last year also knew the recruiting hotbed area pretty well.
I just said Charlotte's defense gave up 40 points a game. UCF gave up 41 points a game, so they were even worse than Charlotte. But I think you move up a little bit. Yeah. Maybe not a lot in year one, but I think you get 3 wins.
Okay, 3 wins.
Maybe 4. I don't think they repeat 1-11 again.
I think going by they're going to have to be better. This is not a small school that sits in a nothing area of football talent.
Yeah.
They should never be 1-11. I can handle if you tell me they're 4.
I think next to UCF, they have the highest enrollment in the state
Correct.
of Florida.
I mean, it's not a small, poor school. It's a huge school in the south of Florida, which is probably the biggest recruiting hotbed there is. So I don't know why they fell this far. I can't say, but it's...
Was it about a decade ago they were competing for New Year's Day bowl games?
This was one of the original dominant small school programs, but it has not been good for a while now, and it seems to get worse and worse. So we'll see. Tulsa...
Another new coach.
A new coach.
He's actually Kevin Wilson. He spent the last 5 years the coordinator at Ohio State.
Yeah. I think Tulsa will be Tulsa. It probably will land somewhere between 4 and 8, and it'll be a little bit of randomness that tells you if it's going to be a good season or a bad season.
They lost a big chunk of their defense to the transfer portal. They're kind of becoming, a lot of these Group of 5 schools, they're jump off and landing spots. Yeah. So the guys that go to the Power 5 that don't make it transfer down, and then the guys that are good enough to transfer up, transfer out. So we see a lot of change-ups, but their offensive line last year was terrible. They gave up 45 sacks last year, and I just don't know. I mean, they're replacing a lot of those guys. Maybe those guys are better, but definitely another middle-of-the-road team here.
I mean, honestly, watching them last year, 5 wins I thought was a minor miracle. I thought they were really bad. So this team sort of just finds a way to win a handful of football games. And like I said, I think it's a little bit of randomness whether they, hit that 6-7 win mark or, it's sitting at 4 or 5. It never seems to be rock bottom for them like South Florida's hit, but, it has been really good for them, just a couple of years ago when they had that really, really good defense. But we'll move on to the Mountain West here. We might be talking about a Big 5 here sooner or later for the conference boys.
I'm assuming the remaining Pac-12 are going to absorb into the Mountain West, or the Mountain West are going to absorb them, one or the other.
That being said, anyone who's watched these two conferences play football over the last, 15 years, probably already adjusted and was like, I think the Mountain West has just as many good football teams as the Pac-12. But nonetheless, we'll start with Boise State.
One thing before we get into this, it could put a little twist on the Mountain West season this year. Divisions are gone.
Yes.
It's just a 12-team conference now, which could make the scheduling a little bit more interesting. And where, Boise State's typically been on the more beneficial side of the
That's correct.
Of the scheduling. So I think it could make it a little bit more interesting.
All right. So I was disappointed in Boise State last year. Now, granted, they still ended up going
undefeated in the conference.
But it was never, what can I say? It was always a little rugged. Now, I should say, all of that was quarterback play, I think, initiated. They finally went to the quarterback who they should have been playing to start.
Taylon Green.
Now, he's a little... he was raw last year. I don't know what he is this year, but he's a playmaker.
He's a good dual threat playmaker.
And if that passing comes around, they always have playmakers on the outside and solid running game. I think the defense was probably as disappointing as I've seen a Boise State defense be since they really sort of have I mean, that late 90s jump when Boise State sort of started to make a name for themselves, they seem to give up more and more big plays than I'd ever seen Boise State.
It's interesting you say that because I looked at their defense and, the defense did lose them some games, but it was low-scoring games. Yeah. They didn't actually give up that many yards. It was big plays.
Yeah, it was
weird stuff.
Plays. Now some of that could have been, the quarterback making turnovers in the defense, but it wasn't a Boise State defense I was sort of used to seeing. Linebackers making big tackles, corners isolated one-on-one. They've been running pro defenses since, the mid-90s, and it just seemed like those corners were not of the level of past Boise State corners, and they were getting beat on those big plays. So what do you make of them this year?
I think they're going to compete for the conference. Yes. I've got them near the top. I think the talent coming back on offense, they're going to have a rhythm there this year that they didn't have at the beginning of last season. So I think they're going to perform well. We're going to know really quick off the bat. They got Washington and UCF early in non-conference. Yeah, I think they could definitely go undefeated in conference play again this year.
It probably sort of depends what you think of a couple others. The Central Florida game, I think, pretty much summed up Boise State's whole season, where they melted down and blew that game.
Yeah.
Air Force 10-3, really, really played well. It's been a couple good years here for Air Force. They started to tail off towards that tail end of the conference, but it's hard to sort of judge this team. I think they'll be what Air Force usually is. 10 wins seems like a bit of a jump, but Troy Calhoun always has these guys ready to go and playing good football. I think it might drop back down after a couple good years here for Air Force to more the 7-8 wins, but you think Air Force can climb into that 9-10 again?
I like Air Force. I've got them right behind Boise again here. I think they've got two guys coming back on their offensive line that are all Mountain West.
Yes.
And they had only gave up 13.5 points per game on defense, and they bring back a lot of that defense. The question is are they going to have that leader at quarterback? I'm not sure who their quarterback is going to be, and they're changing their running back. So the offense is, can they replace what they did on offense last year? But they only need to score 20 points usually with the strength of their defense.
That's been their jump the last couple of years to that sort of 9-10 when Marcus, their defense had been improved. It's a little hard to gauge the offense because it's always been a little plug and play. You go like, well, new quarterback, new running back, but it's guys who've run the option and have been doing the same thing for forever. So I guess there's a little bit of this guy runs it a little better than this guy, but it's a little plug and play. But as long as their defense stays steady, you're probably right. They can stay in that 9-10 win.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe a 10, 8, 9.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit of a drop off, but probably not a huge amount.
Yeah. All right, we go here to San Diego State. I think this was really sort of disappointing for them last year. It was sort of the worst I'd seen them in a while, and probably
their offense was lousy.
Sort of the worst I'd seen of the Brady Hoke era, either one, the first one or this one. Their offense always, isn't what do we want to say, great, but it was beyond pale of being even functional last year. So can San Diego State here bounce back and get back on track, or is this sort of where they're going to live here in that sort of 7-win territory with a handful of disappointing losses?
Yeah, I've got them as the first drop off, kind of after Air Force, Fresno, and Boise. I think there's a big drop.
Yeah.
And then you kind of land here with San Diego State and a few other teams. And I don't think they're going to get to that 8-9 and compete and push Air Force up there. I think you may even see a little bit of a regression getting to 5 or 6 wins this year. Just a lot of pieces left this team, and I don't think they have a great coach.
I'm curious if I think this is. I don't want to insult Brady Hoke because he's been good for San Diego State both times. When he was there, left, went to Michigan, came back, and kept the program doing well. But I'm wondering if that message is sort of a little stale now, because it's been it's been 3 or 4 years.
I think we had high expectations for them going into last year.
Yeah.
They were one of the teams we had picked high.
It's been a regressing offense that's getting worse and worse each and every year, and they haven't had that. Before that, they had at least a NFL level running back.
Yeah.
And they haven't had that, and you can't be basing your hopes on an NFL running back every year. And I thought their line keeps getting worse and worse. So I'm wondering if this gets a little stale. And
they also
where they live.
That a lot of the wins they got last year were close wins. They didn't cover spreads very well, so that could transition into losses, cause an even bigger drop off. Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see if that's where they are or where they aren't. This one was one I was high on last year. That they thought Wyoming was going to drop, and I was like, Wyoming doesn't drop. One, it's too hard to go there and play football games, and two, Craig Bowl just seems to have a functional program that, at its worst probably wins 5 games, and at its best can sort of scrap together 8-9 wins. 7-6 last year on a rebuilding team. I'd be amazed if they could get to that 7 again. But like I said, it is very difficult to go in Laramie, and there's going to be a couple games where the wind is blowing 50 miles an hour and no one can score points.
And the thing is the strength of this team is their defense. They play great defense.
They've sort of become what San Diego State used to be.
They bring back all of their defense for the most part. Their quarterback comes back, but he was not great.
He was capable
to give the ball to the other team.
He was capable of taking a snap. That was
if they can improve on offense a little bit, I see they could maybe repeat with last year. I've got them in the same clump as San Diego State. At best, they repeat what they did last year, but they could fall off.
I'll put it this way. Watching them, because I took a lot of unders and I took a lot of Wyoming, there were times where I thought they would be better off just kneeling and punting the ball than literally running offensive plays. I am curious to see where they land here. Jeff Tedford, Fresno State comes in here, 10-4 last year, 7-1. Sort of after, I don't know what to call it the year before. A lot of people got hurt, so the year before was a throwaway. Back on track last year. Does it continue here? I know they've lost. The offense is not the offense that it's been. So does it pop back?
Jake Hayner went to the NFL. Jalen Morrow Cropper went to the NFL. So big-time quarterback, big-time wide receiver are gone. Looks like they're going to start the quarterback transfer from UCF. So maybe he steps in and keeps that offense rolling. But, they brought back a lot of their players on defense, but most of their secondary is gone. I think losing your secondary and replacing a lot of pieces on offense is going to be just too tough of a combination to overcome and repeat what they did last year.
I'm interested to see where this team sort of lands. They lost a lot of that offense, but the one thing I trust Jeff Tedford to do is put people into offensive positions and score points. Like you said, they lost a lot of their secondary. So I'm wondering if they can hold up, and if it's a lot of sort of games where their offense plays well, but they can't hold up and lose a couple games on the last couple possessions there. So it'll be interesting to see where they fall. I definitely think they're a contender up there. The other one, I think, I don't know if I put them as a contender or not, but it's just been a weird sort of ride with San Jose State. 2 years ago, they were the talk of the town. The year before that, they were awful. And then last year, they were sort of medium, and they come out and they could win a game that you wouldn't think they could win, and then they'd randomly lose a game. I think they're going to be a pretty good football team this year. I think they're sort of I don't want to call them a contender, but I think if sort of things fall right like it did for them, I think it was 3 years ago, I think they could be in that sort of, 8-9 win territory if everything falls well for them. And
they won 7 games last year, but 3 of their losses were by 8 points or less. So they really had an opportunity to get to 10 wins last year, with some close ones going their way. They did lose some key pieces on defense. They lost 2 guys accounting for almost 17 sacks.
And when they've been good, their defense has been
good. So if they can, we'll see if they can replace that talent. One thing I look at, they've got Boise, they've got Fresno, they've got Air Force, they've got San Diego State. Really tough conference schedule, and
at UNLV.
And they didn't do themselves any favors starting off the year with USC and Oregon
State.
Yes,
I know.
So I
at Toledo's not very fun either. So.
Those 3 of those 4 that I named, I think, are losses. Those 2 are losses. You're already at your loss total from last season with some other games that could go either way. I don't see them moving any further past 7-5.
Yeah, I think they'll hover right around where they were last year, but I'm interested to see what this team brings. Utah State. Blake Anderson comes here for his 3rd season.
Well, 2 years ago
they were overachievers.
11 games. Yeah.
I don't know if I'd call them underachievers last year, because I think it sort of balanced out more with what we thought they were going to be 2 years ago. I think this is the year where we sort of see, if Blake can sort of fire the Aggies back to what he had them.
Well, his offensive coordinator left for Indiana, and I've read that he's taking over the offensive play calling. So that
it could be good or bad. It's how he made his name, but
they did lose a lot of guys to the transfer portal, and their defense last year allowed 10 more points than their offense averaged. So they're going to have to flip that script a little bit. They're not going to get up to that 11 win total they had a couple years ago, but I definitely could see them in this range.
Could they get 9?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No.
That's I think you'd.
I mean, Vegas has the over/under at 5.5, which is basically putting them repeating what they did last year. I don't know if they fall that far. Their non-conferences is actually pretty favorable compared to other teams in this conference, so they're going to be, should I say, fresher for the conference games, because they're not going to have these powerhouse teams. They're going to play on their non-conferences, Connecticut and Idaho State. They got James Madison, which that's a good one, but it's not Oregon and USC.
And it's at home. They should beat James. If they're going to get to an 8-9 win mark, they need to beat James Madison at their home place in Logan. I think Boise will be around their normal 10 win mark, but I think that 2nd place spot it's probably a couple teams hovering to need that 9 win to get to that championship.
I like Fresno the best. Well, Fresno and Air Force I think are the first 2, and then you've got a slew of like 5 teams that could get right in there as well.
It probably sort of means how injuries go, how the season starts. Colorado State, 2nd year for Jay Norvell. This used to be a pretty good program. It hasn't been a good program for a pretty long time. They were pretty awful last year. I will say they were at least tried hard. They got railed every game, but they didn't quit. Improvement or just
their offensive line gave up 59 sacks last year. It was tough to watch. They only scored 13.5 points per game.
I said not good. Tried hard, not good.
They do return a wide receiver last year. They got a little over 1,100 yards in Troy Horton, so they got that going for them.
Do they have a quarterback that can throw on the ball? That was an issue last year.
We will see. I'm not sold on this team. I think we could see a lot of the same this year.
Yeah. I thought the 4.5 win total was a little.
That's a little aggressive.
Steep. It probably depends what you think of Jay Norvell. I don't think a ton, so I think we'll sit there and be.
Speaking of Jay Norvell.
Yes. Speaking of Jay Norvell.
His former team.
Yes. Nevada 2-10. Definite. What the hell happened here last year?
Was this one of my big failures last year? I think I had some futures on Nevada.
I think you did, but I don't.
I had a lot of swings and misses last season.
But I don't think anybody foresaw the 0-8 conference record. Honestly, I don't know what the hell happened to them last year. I mean, even Nevada at its worst is a 6-win team usually.
Yeah.
So this was a complete and utter drop. I don't know if this is just going to become the thing and they're going to mosey off into irrelevance. I find that hard to believe, but I don't know. Last year was so bad. I don't know. I don't know if Ken Wilson can get this right. Everything was bad last year.
Yeah, they're bringing in a lot of transfers. I think their starting quarterback and running back are both coming from the portal. That could be good. Defense gave up 31 points a game. They only scored 18 points per game. That spells a lot of losses. I mean, just a quick glance at their schedule, I'm seeing 2 to 4 wins. So
Yeah,
we'll see what it turns into.
definitely.
I think if you don't get above that 4-win mark, we could be looking at another coach.
Yeah, I just there's not much I can give because I
Yeah.
was so stunned at how bad it was last year, and I just didn't quite understand. All right,
One of your favorite teams.
one of my favorites. We go to UNLV. I don't know if we call them the darlings of the Mountain West, but they did win 5 games. They were pretty entertaining. I will say that.
They started off the year 4-1,
yes,
but then went on a 1-6 stretch to finish the season.
They started playing real teams all of a sudden.
I think I lost a lot of bets here on this one.
5 was be about where I see them again this year. Barry Odom comes in. I was never a huge fan at Missouri. I don't know.
I think we're going to see a lot of defense and running.
I was big on them last year. Big to, 5 to 7 wins. They got the 5. I would be stunned if they could get to 6 wins. I think this is about a 3 or 4 win team. They hit their max sort of last year, but we'll see if they can come back and be spunky. UNLV has gone through a lot of coaches who've had big names, and no one has seemed to be able to find the right formula to build them into a consistent winner. Speaking of no one can build into a consistent winner, New Mexico, I think they had a year with Brian Urlacher where they were like 6, maybe 7 wins, but they were awful last year, 0-8 in conference as well.
Yeah, they'll be competing with Nevada for the bottom.
I foresee them to be awful again this year. Anything, they were kind of explosive on offense,
Well, they're bringing in the offensive coordinator from UAB and the quarterback from UAB with him and Dylan Hopkins. So we'll see if that brings a little bit of a spark to the offense.
I remember watching them a couple times, and occasionally they could hit big plays on offense if I'm being kind to something they did semi-okay.
But they did lose everything on defense. So they're
Which wasn't that good to begin with, mind you.
I think they're going to have to get a spark on offense to move up any, but I've got them bottom of the barrel.
This is going to be a bad team, and they won't be able to beat them. This is kind of a fun one. Timmy Chang in his second year here. Not a great year for the Rainbow Warriors, but...
this is a team that benefited from Nevada being terrible because they got the win over Nevada. They got the win over UNLV. Gave them a little bit of momentum at the end of the year. But their defense, in the Mountain West was dead last in the conference.
I'm curious to see if they can find some sort of even ground. I always loved Timmy Chang when he was playing quarterback out of Hawaii. We'll see if he can sort of get them flying, June Jones style again.
He's trying to implement the kind of run and shoot that he did, but they don't really have the personnel to execute it yet. That's
the problem. Timmy Chang can't go in there and play quarterback with Devon Bess and such. And as always, they have road struggles because they have to come from Hawaii to play games on the mainland, which never makes things easy. This is sort of wait and see. I think they'll be better than the 3-10 they were last year, but I don't know if they'll be much better. 6 wins would be a stretch for me to get to a bowl game, but maybe they can do it.
Yeah, I mean, the line's at 3.5. They won 3 last year, so a little bit of improvement there I think is possible.
Yeah, definitely so. All right, that wraps up the Mountain West. Let's get into our NFL preview, and let's get into the NFC North. We'll start out with the NFC North favorites, and I don't know if we get to say this a whole lot, but somehow the Detroit Lions are NFC North favorites. But judging by the teams in these leagues, that doesn't make all that much. Basically, I think I could pretty much sum that up for all the NFC.
Well, I looked it up, and the Lions... a team that has more recently won this division than the Lions was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when this was the Central division. It's been like 30 years, I think, since the Lions have won this division. So it'll be a sight to see if they can pull that off.
Lions, 9.5 win total. Bring back the offense that was really solid. I probably should say bring back the offensive coordinator, which was the main thing. Had to pay him a lot of money. Defense appears to be growing. Can we buy the Detroit Lions as a legit contender here in the NFC?
I don't know. They've got David Montgomery coming in at running back, and rookie Jahmyr Gibbs that they just got. Jamison Williams suspended the first 6 games
after missing pretty much all last year, being hurt.
But they did bring back the old time Detroit lineman Marvin Jones. So I like to see that. But their defense is kind of where they were lacking last year. They're kind of shoring up some of those problems. They brought in some corners to help with that. They got Sutton in there at corner, so maybe they've shored up some of their defensive problems. But I do see them winning this division. Yeah. What they can do beyond that is still a question mark in my eyes.
Yeah. The only thing I would not be betting on this team because I don't think it presents a lot of value.
I think their schedule was pretty tough. Outside of their division anyway.
That's what I just don't see any value here in taking these Lions, even as bad as the NFC is. It would be hard for me to believe that they'd go on a run here. But when you start stacking up teams' rosters and depth charts, it probably is one of the better collections of talent in the NFC. So you have to take them serious in the way they finished last year. I don't take them as a joke.
Well, and the players love their coach. Yeah. He's definitely a player's coach. So,
now, whether he can manage end-of-game situations, I would like to know, certainly betting-wise. But
it'd be interesting to see if Goff can repeat his resurgence that he brought in last year.
Mm-hmm. All right, we'll move on to the next one, and we'll go to the Minnesota Vikings. Dalvin Cook out of here. Kirk Cousins somehow remains the Michael Myers of the NFL quarterbacking world. Jordan Jefferson here. This team basically won every one possession game they had. This team got reeled in the playoffs.
This team had no business getting the win-loss record that they had last year. They went 11-0 in one-score games last season, which is pretty much mathematically and statistically impossible to repeat this year. And not to mention, I think they had a top 5 in schedule difficulty jump from last year to this year. Yeah. So I think this could be a big drop-off for the Vikings this year.
Yeah, I think we go back to...
Oh, and you talk about Cook gone, but Thielen's gone as well.
The drop-off from, Jefferson to the others, yes, but Thielen I didn't think had been great the last couple of years, so I sort of want on that, but I'm sort of want on the Vikings. I think we just sort of go back to what they've been, the previous...
Yeah.
However
their defense is lousy.
Torturous has been with Kirk Cousins. It's probably a 7, 8, 9 win team. They'll look good sometimes, they'll look awful sometimes, and then they'll probably make the playoffs and lose in the wild card round. I mean, I will say this: the defense, 4 or 5 years ago was one of the better defenses in the NFL,
old.
and it seems to keep getting worse and worse, and they don't seem to be replacing those guys. So, could you see where they drop to maybe the bottom of this division if things go bad?
Yeah, potentially. I think Chicago's probably going to be improved, and I think the big question mark is where Green Bay falls.
Yeah, I'm curious too if they get off to a bad start, because I think 2 years ago they got off to that bad start and then closed really, really well. If they sort of go into tank mode and sort of go, it's time for a reset and refresh, and finally the Cousins area is over, and they sort of try to make that chase to get Caleb Williams in there.
Yeah.
I'd be very interested in that. We'll go on to our next team, and we'll go to the aforementioned Green Bay Packers. Totally new era. I think the defense will be one of the better ones in the NFC.
Yeah.
The defensive coordinator is gone, thank God, because he was awful with the talent they have. I think this defense has a whole lot of talent. Flip over to the offensive side of things, I have no idea.
Well,
maybe they can run the ball with Jones and.
Yeah, I mean, they've got a great offensive line. Or, I mean, okay offensive line. I don't say great. They're solid.
Depends how healthy Bakhtiari is.
Yeah, they're not the worst, and they've got a good running back. But, Rodgers left because they didn't put weapons around him. And they bring in Love, who only has one career start, to deal with, I mean, all of these receivers would be, at best, a number 2 anywhere else in NFL football. I don't think they have a dominant go-to guy. I mean, Watson's okay.
He's explosive.
He doesn't have Rodgers throwing him the ball this year.
That's it's some of this is what you. I think projecting them is some of this is what you predict of Jordan Love. But I hear a lot of people comparing the Love situation to the Rodgers situation. But Jordan Love barely played college football. He had one. I think one
season.
I wouldn't even say great season. He had one season where he showed potential. He was able to move around. He has the cannon arm. He looked like an NFL quarterback. But comparing this to like an Aaron Rodgers situation, who was one of the most dominant college quarterbacks in the last 30 years, is not the same thing. I don't know if he comes in and starts throwing BB darts, into a window this big like Aaron Rodgers did. And the other thing, I'm curious how long a leash, because the option is there for Jordan Love. They don't have to sign him next year.
Yeah, he's on the end of his deal.
Yeah, it's sort of a make or break.
They could go full rebuild.
And if he's not any good, you randomly throw him. I mean, the starting quarterback money on the bottom end is now like $25 million a year.
Yeah.
I don't know if you do that if you don't see anything here.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to really have to see some stuff to give him that kind of money, I think.
Yeah. What do you think this team, can they just win games on their defense and their running game? Because I think that's what they're going to try to do here. And they might be able to, especially in this sort of poor NFC East.
I hate to say this, but they do kind of remind me of my favorite team in the NFL. Coincidentally enough, their head coach came from my team, the Tennessee Titans. They're going to run the ball. Yeah. They're going to throw in some play action. They're not going to put too much pressure on their quarterback. But in this day and age, and the NFL is what it is now, that doesn't win many football games unless you have the best offensive line and running back in the game. And I don't think they have that.
I'm curious to see where they fall. I'm curious to see Jordan Love play football, because we haven't seen him play football in 4 years. And I thought he was solid. I thought it was a little bit where he should have come back. But, you're a first-round pick. You take it where you can. But I'm interested to see where this team is, because I could see it falling off a map, and I could also see him, winning 10, 11 games and winning the NFC North, especially with that defense and as poor as it is. So interesting it will be for Green Bay here. And then this possibly is really the most interesting team in the North, because this really could go many, many different ways. They spent money in the offseason, sort of rebuilt that defense, rebuilt the line.
I think they're still trying to do a lot of the rebuilding process here, though. And you know, Fields is in year 3 already.
We're talking about making a quarterback decision. This is it.
It just feels like it's, you know, I don't know, perception-wise, it feels like Fields just got here, and they're still building this team around him. But it's year 3 with Fields, and it, like I said, I think it's now. And you know, if they don't get the pieces around him, his rookie deal's going to be up, and then, you know, do you pay him that kind of money and not have the team around him?
Well, that's I'm very interested because, you know, you see athleticism and plays from Fields, but I mean, if you go back and watch any of their games, now some of that has to do with weapons and the line.
Yeah.
You know, he wasn't given, but they didn't even want to throw the ball last year. So what is that this year? Is he even capable? Now, you know, they added more from Carolina. Claypool comes in there. Mooney's in there. Cole Kmet's in there. I wouldn't say it's high-end weapons, but that's 3 receivers that have to be respected, and Moore's a fringe one. I thought he was really good at Carolina. I don't know. This team could be 2 wins, and it could be 10 wins.
Yeah, I think they're going to have a solid defense. They shorted up. I thought Edwards and Edmonds were both great additions at the linebacker position. But still got a lot of room to improve, especially in the secondary. But I still think they're going to try to play this kind of small ball stuff. And, you know, and it's going to really rely on Fields carrying them, and it's a lot of pressure on him. We'll see. I think, you know, I think they have more upside than the Vikings or the Packers. But we'll see.
Yeah, definitely so. All right, so close out the NFL. Give me your sort of order here for the NFC North.
Oh, gosh. I'm going to go Lions, Bears, Vikings, Packers.
Well, this is going to be fun. We at least both have the Lions. I'm going Lions, Packers, Vikings, Bears. So I think that pretty much sums up the NFC just in a whole. Maybe one good team, and then I think we think the second place team could be last. The last place team could be second. So that wraps it up. We got all our previews done. We had to
got a lot of college football there.
We had to double it up. We'll be back to maybe 2 teams next week. For the Wager Zone. Be sure to like and subscribe and watch all of our shows. You can catch our winning daily picks. Dynamite David will be with his picks tomorrow. I'll have my picks probably late Friday. You'll want to get in on those. All sorts of soccer coming up this weekend. I might delve back into my NFL preseason since it was what I came out with a profit margin on to start the year. But like, subscribe. That's our show, and we're out.
This is Stapleton Airport information, Mike. Wind at 320 degrees at 6, temperature 5.
Strip's where I'm gonna land. Only the word is crash.